I sighed heavily as I hung up the phone, the weight of Nolan's news settling like a heavy stone in my gut. My son had lost his job after some scandal at work. The details were still hazy, but it didn't matter. What mattered was that he needed financial support, and as his mother, I felt obligated to help. "Everything okay, Evelyn?" Clara's concerned voice pulled me from my thoughts. My oldest friend had stopped by for our weekly coffee date, her warm eyes studying me carefully. "It's Nolan," I confessed, sinking onto the couch beside her. "He lost his job and is asking for help with expenses until he gets back on his feet." Clara's brow furrowed, but she didn't voice the skepticism I knew she felt. "Well, you'll help him out, of course. That's what mothers do." I nodded, even as doubt gnawed at me. Nolan had always been a bit entitled, expecting handouts and bailouts whenever life got tough. But I couldn't turn my back on my own child, could I? Before I could dwell further, my phone rang again, this time Marley's number flashing on the screen. I braced myself as I answered, her sharp tone immediately grating on my nerves. "Did Nolan talk to you? We're in a real bind here, Evelyn. You need to help us out financially until he finds another job." There it was, not a request, but a demand. I could almost see Marley's eyes narrowing, her lips pursed in that condescending pout she wore whenever I dared to disagree with her. "Of course, I'll do what I can," I assured her, hating the way my voice trembled. "But I'm on a fixed income, so there are limits to how much I can contribute." Marley scoffed, the sound like nails on a chalkboard. "You're our only option right now, Evelyn. Don't you want to make sure Lila is taken care of?" The mention of my precious granddaughter tugged at my heartstrings. Lila was the light of my life, and the thought of her struggling because of her father's mistakes was unbearable. "Of course I do," I whispered, defeated. "Then we'll expect your support. I'll be in touch with details." The line went dead, leaving me staring at the phone in disbelief. Clara reached over, patting my hand gently. "You're too good for this world, Evelyn," she murmured. "But you know they're taking advantage of you, don't you?" I did know, deep down. But what choice did I have? Family came first, no matter how much it hurt. The next few weeks passed in a blur of belt-tightening and sacrifice. True to her word, Marley was in constant contact, messaging me with a never-ending list of expenses they needed help covering. Rent, utilities, groceries. It was like they expected me to fund their entire lifestyle. I canceled my cable subscription and said goodbye to my weekly mahjong group, using the extra money to send Nolan and Marley. Dinners out with Clara became a distant memory as I clipped coupons and bought only the essentials at the grocery store. "You're spreading yourself too thin," Clara cautioned during one of her rare visits. She eyed the stack of bills on my kitchen counter with thinly veiled disapproval. "It's only temporary," I assured her, even as doubt crept in. How long until Nolan found a new job? How many months? Years? Could I sustain this pace? Clara opened her mouth, no doubt to argue further, but the shrill ring of my phone cut her off. Marley's name flashed across the screen. "Hello?" I answered, bracing myself. "Evelyn, thank God. I need you to come over and watch Lila tonight. Nolan has a job interview, and I have plans." Plans? Of course she did. I pictured Marley lounging at a spa or sipping overpriced cocktails with friends while I looked after her daughter. Resentment coiled in my chest, but one glance at the photo of Lila on my fridge extinguished it. That sweet, innocent face, how could I say no? "All right," I agreed with a weary sigh. "I'll be over soon." I spent the evening playing princess with Lila, her peals of laughter a balm to my troubled soul. But as the night wore on, so did my energy. By the time Nolan and Marley finally returned close to midnight, I could barely keep my eyes open. "Thanks for watching her," Marley said dismissively as I gathered my things to leave. "Oh, and can you swing by tomorrow and do a few loads of laundry? I'm swamped this week." The request, no, demand, landed like a slap. I opened my mouth to protest, to remind her that I wasn't her personal maid, but Nolan cut me off. "That would be a huge help, Mom. We really appreciate everything you're doing for us." His words, coupled with Lila's sleepy smile as she waved goodbye, drained the fight from me. I nodded mutely and let myself out, the weight of their expectations pressing down on me with every step. As I crawled into bed that night, exhaustion seeped into my very bones. But there was no rest for me, not when Marley's demands and Nolan's passive pleas echoed incessantly in my mind. I was trapped, a prisoner to their needs and my own guilt-ridden conscience. When would it end? I wondered as sleep finally claimed me. When would the sacrifices be enough? The demands only escalated from there. Marley seemed to find new tasks for me every other day: cleaning, grocery shopping, running errands. I lost count of the hours I spent at their house, scrubbing floors and folding laundry while Marley lounged nearby, barking orders. "You missed a spot," she'd snap, gesturing vaguely with her ever-present glass of wine. "And don't forget to dust the baseboards this time." I bit my tongue until it bled, swallowing the retorts that bubbled up in my throat. I was helping, I reminded myself, for Nolan and Lila. But the resentment was becoming harder to ignore, especially when Marley treated my contributions like trivial nuisances. One particularly demanding week, I arrived to clean only to find Marley on the phone with a friend, complaining loudly about me. "She thinks changing a few loads of laundry is such a big deal," she groused, not bothering to lower her voice as I entered the room. "Like we should be grateful for her pitiful efforts to help her own family." The words struck me like a physical blow. I froze in the doorway, rooted to the spot as Marley's venom washed over me. "She's just so draining, you know," Marley continued, oblivious to my presence, always moping around like a pathetic old woman, acting like we've ruined her life by needing her help. Tears pricked my eyes, but I refused to let them fall, not in front of her. Steeling myself, I cleared my throat loudly. Marley whipped around, eyes widening briefly in surprise before narrowing into icy slits. "Well, if it isn't pitiful Pauline herself," she sneered. "You're early." I opened my mouth, 1,000 blistering retorts dancing on my tongue. But what could I say? She'd only double down, twisting the situation until I was the villain. So I clamped my jaw shut and got to work, moving stiffly around the house as Marley's hateful gaze bore into me. The words replayed in my mind like a broken record. Pitiful, draining, a burden on her perfect life. Was that really how she saw me? How they all saw me? By the time I returned home that evening, I was trembling with a toxic mixture of rage, humiliation, and despair. Clara took one look at me and enveloped me in a tight hug. "Oh, honey," she murmured, reading the anguish in my eyes. "What did they do this time?" I spilled everything: Marley's cruel words, the constant demands, the endless thankless tasks. Clara listened in stunned silence, her expression growing darker by the second. "You have to stop this, Evelyn," she urged when I finally fell quiet. "They're using you, draining you dry with no remorse. It's financial abuse, plain and simple." I wanted to protest, to defend Nolan and insist this was just a rough patch. But Clara's words struck a chord, giving voice to the niggling doubts that had plagued me for weeks. Was she right? Was I being taken advantage of by my own family? The realization left me hollowed out, a cavern of hurt and disillusionment yawning in my chest. I'd bent over backwards, sacrificed everything to help my son and daughter-in-law, only to be scorned and ridiculed for my efforts. In that moment, I knew something had to change, but could I find the strength to stand up to them? Or would I continue to suffer in silence, a willing victim to their cruelty? Despite Clara's impassioned pleas, I couldn't bring myself to cut Nolan and Marley off completely. Not yet. So when Marley showed up at my door a few days later, eyes brimming with tears, I let her in against my better judgment. "Evelyn, thank God you're home," she blubbered, sinking onto my couch. "I don't know what to do." Alarm bells clanged in my mind, but I pushed them aside. "What's wrong, Marley? Is everything okay with Lila?" She shook her head, bottom lip trembling. "It's Lila, the poor thing." She broke off with a theatrical sob. "Her doctor says she needs an expensive treatment, some new experimental therapy, but it's not covered by our insurance and we can't afford it on our own." My heart stuttered in my chest. Lila, my precious granddaughter, sick and needing help? A tidal wave of protective instinct crashed over me, drowning out the lingering bitterness from our last encounter. "How much is it?" I demanded, already steeling myself for the blow to my dwindling savings. Marley named a figure that made my head spin. It was more than I had left, even after liquidating some of my modest investments. But I didn't hesitate. "I'll get the money," I promised, ignoring the way Marley's expression shifted ever so slightly, a flicker of something like triumph in her eyes. "Whatever it takes to help Lila." Over the next few days, I drained what was left of my retirement fund, scraped together every penny I could find. When Marley came to collect the full amount, I handed it over without a second thought, the image of Lila's bright smile spurring me on. "You're doing the right thing," Clara insisted when I confessed what I'd done. But her frown belied her words, etching deep lines of worry around her mouth. I brushed off her concerns. This was for Lila, I told myself. She was what mattered. But the doubts continued to niggle at me in the following weeks. Marley was oddly evasive when I asked for details about Lila's treatment, changing the subject or offering vague reassurances, and Nolan seemed distant, like he was avoiding me. The knot of unease in my gut grew larger with each passing day until finally, a chance encounter set the truth crashing down around me. I ran into Dr. Patel, Lila's pediatrician, at the grocery store. We made small talk for a moment before I contained my curiosity any longer. "How is Lila's treatment going?" I blurted out. "That new experimental therapy?" Dr. Patel's brow furrowed in confusion. "Experimental therapy? Lila hasn't been prescribed any new treatments lately. She's a perfectly healthy little girl." The world seemed to tilt on its axis as the doctor's words penetrated the fog of denial. Marley had lied about all of it. Which meant the money, every last penny of my life's savings, had been taken under false pretenses. White-hot rage roared through me, scalding away any lingering doubts. They'd taken advantage of me, bled me dry with their greed and manipulation. But no more. As I looked up and met Dr. Patel's concerned gaze, a newfound resolve settled over me. It was time to make them pay. No more sacrifices, no more pitying them. Marley wanted to see a pitiful old woman. She was about to get her wish. The rage simmered for days, a constant undercurrent thrumming through my veins. I went through the motions of my daily life, cleaning, cooking, tending to my dwindling garden, but my mind remained fixated on Marley's deceit. Clara tried in vain to soothe me. "You need to confront them," she urged during one of her weekly visits. "Get your money back and cut them off before they drain you completely." But I brushed off her advice, tamping down the anger until it became a cold, hard knot in the pit of my stomach. I needed to bide my time, gather my strength. After so many years of being the meek, obliging mother and grandmother, it wasn't easy to slip into a role of confrontation. My chance came about a week later, when Nolan and Marley swung by unannounced. As soon as I opened the door, Marley's shrill voice assaulted me. "There you are. We've been trying to reach you." She barged past me into the living room, not waiting for an invitation. Nolan followed behind, head down like a scolded puppy. I took a deep, steadying breath before turning to face them. "What do you want?" Marley lifted a perfectly arched brow at my blunt tone, but didn't comment. "We're in a tough spot again, and we need you to help out." "Help out?" The words hung in the air like a lead weight. "You mean like how you helped out by lying about Lila being sick?" The temperature in the room seemed to plummet as Marley's eyes went wide, then narrowed to icy slits. Nolan shifted uncomfortably beside her. "I don't know what you're talking about," Marley said, each word precise and clipped. "Don't play dumb," I snapped, surprising us both with the venom in my voice. "I know there was no experimental treatment, no medical bills at all. You took my life savings under false pretenses." Silence rippled out in the wake of my accusation. Nolan opened and closed his mouth like a gasping fish, but no words emerged. Marley, for her part, seemed to recover her composure quickly. "Oh, please," she scoffed with an arrogant toss of her hair. "It was a little white lie to ensure Lila got the care she needed. You're blowing this way out of proportion." Out of proportion? I could feel my control slipping, decades of repressed anger bubbling to the surface. "You stole from me, Marley. And you," I turned on Nolan, who shrank back against the onslaught of my fury. "You just stood by and let it happen." Nolan held up his hands in a placating gesture. "Mom, I'm sure Marley didn't mean any harm. We're just in a rough patch right now." "Enough!" The shout burst from my lips, shocking all three of us into stunned silence. Taking a shuddering breath, I fixed them with my coldest stare. "I want my money back, every penny, and I want guaranteed visitation with Lila, without either of you there." "Or what?" Marley sneered, seemingly emboldened by my outburst. "What are you going to do, old woman? Call the police?" There was that insult again, old woman. But this time it struck not like a slur, but a badge of honor. I was old and I was a woman, and I would no longer let those facts be wielded against me like weapons. Squaring my shoulders, I lifted my chin in defiance. Actually, I was thinking of taking you to court. The smug look melted off Marley's face as my words hit their mark. Before she could recover, I pressed on. I have friends, connections, people who can help me get the best lawyers in town, and I'll make sure the whole truth comes out about how you preyed on a seemingly helpless old woman to fund your lifestyle through lies and manipulation. I leveled my gaze at Nolan, who looked utterly shell-shocked. I'm done being your victim. It's time you both face the consequences. With that, I turned on my heel and stormed out of the room, leaving them gaping in my wake. The shackles of guilt and obligation had finally fallen away, and in their place blossomed the first delicate tendrils of something I hadn't felt in far too long. Power. True to my word, I refused to back down from my ultimatum. Nolan and Marley tried to placate me at first, alternating between hollow apologies and not-so-thinly veiled threats about cutting off access to Lila. But I stood firm, my newfound resolve hardening with each passing day. Finally, after nearly a week of tense silence, they agreed to meet me at Clara's house for a confrontation. I could tell Marley thought bringing the discussion to my friend's neutral territory would somehow intimidate me back into line. But those days were over. "We're here like you demanded," Marley announced as she swept into Clara's living room, chin jutting out defiantly. "So let's get this over with." I took a deep, calming breath, drawing strength from Clara's supportive presence beside me. "I want my money back," I said, keeping my voice even and unwavering. "All of it, down to the last penny." Nolan shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Mom, I told you we don't have that kind of cash lying around right now, but we can work out a payment plan or something." "Don't mom me," I cut him off, surprising myself with the steel in my tone. "This isn't a negotiation. You stole from me, plain and simple. I want my life savings returned in full." "Oh, cut the drama." Marley rolled her eyes. "We needed a little financial help, so we embellished the situation to ensure you'd provide it. You're acting like we committed a crime or something." "Actually, what you did does constitute criminal fraud," Clara interjected coolly, "and Evelyn would be well within her rights to pursue legal action." The words hung heavy in the air as Marley's mouth twisted into an ugly sneer. "Is that what you want, Evelyn? To take your own son and grandchild to court like common criminals?" There it was, the emotional manipulation that had shackled me for so long. I felt it tugging at my resolve, stirring up that old familiar guilt. But this time, I didn't let it take root. If that's what it takes to get back what's mine and ensure continued access to Lila, then yes, I stated, holding Marley's venomous gaze steadily. "I'll do whatever is necessary." Nolan looked stricken, but I refused to meet his eyes. After everything, his passivity was almost as unforgivable as Marley's cruelty. "You can't be serious," Marley sputtered, her facade of nonchalance cracking. "We're family, for God's sake." "Exactly." I leaned forward, bracing my hands on my knees. "We're family, which should have commanded more respect and care from you both, not this cavalier willingness to take advantage of me at every turn." Taking a shuddering breath, I pressed on. "But you've made it clear how little regard you have for me, so if acting like family means subjecting myself to further mistreatment and deceit, then I want no part of it. Not anymore." The fight seemed to go out of Marley at that. Her shoulders slumped, and she dropped her gaze to her lap, mouth pressed into a thin, petulant line. Nolan looked utterly crestfallen, all the privilege and entitlement drained from his expression in the wake of my words. In that moment, they both looked small, diminished, just two deeply flawed people lashing out to get their needs met. Damn the consequences. And as much as their actions had wounded me, I found that I pitied them more than anything. That lost little girl, still seeking motherly approval no matter how grown she was. That little boy, so afraid of facing the world alone that he'd cling to the illusion of familial support at any cost. But that path led nowhere good. I knew that now. For their sake and mine, it was time to sever that cord, to forge new lives unburdened by guilt and toxic bonds, as painful as it would be. "I'm going to give you both some time to decide," I said at last, letting some softness bleed back into my voice. "Return my money in full and guarantee legally binding visitation rights for Lila by the end of the month, or I'll have no choice but to pursue this through the courts, as much as it pains me." Neither said a word as I showed them out, their sullen silence bordering on muteness. But I didn't care. For once, I'd spoken my truth with clarity and courage, unafraid of the consequences. Whatever happened next, there was no going back. Only forward, into the great unknown, or freedom, depending on how you looked at it. The following weeks were a whirlwind of phone calls, meetings, and more confrontations with Nolan and Marley. True to form, they tried every trick in the book to wriggle out of my ultimatum. More empty apologies, vague promises to make things right, thinly veiled threats about keeping Lila away from me. But I didn't budge an inch, my resolve hardening with each passing day. Thanks to Clara's connections, I found myself a skilled, no-nonsense lawyer who helped me build an airtight case against Nolan and Marley. She gathered evidence, constructed legal arguments, and promised to pursue every avenue to not only recoup my savings, but ensure robust visitation rights with my granddaughter. "You're doing the right thing," Clara assured me one evening as we pored over the mounting paperwork. "They'll learn that their actions have consequences." I nodded, though a tiny kernel of doubt still gnawed at me. Could I really go through with this? Taking my own child and his wife to court felt so extreme, unnatural even. Part of me still recoiled at the thought of such a public confrontation. But then I'd remember Marley's sneering disdain, the way she wielded Lila like a weapon to control me, or Nolan's weak, simpering pleas for more assistance, never lifting a finger to rein in his manipulative partner. The resentment would flare hot and bright, scorching away any last remnants of guilt or second-guessing. They'd made their choices, hardened their hearts against me time and again. Now it was my turn to fight back, to demand justice through the power of the law. If I had to become the unrelenting, iron-willed matriarch to make that happen, then so be it. As the court date loomed, the pressure mounted from Nolan and Marley's camp. Increasingly desperate messages and voicemails, alternating between vile insults and saccharine entreaties. On my weakest days I wavered, wondering if avoiding such an ugly public spectacle was worth backing down. But then, a small, quiet voice would pierce the turmoil. Lila's sweet, innocent tones as she asked when I'd come to play princesses again. That's what I fought for, I reminded myself. Not just for restitution, but to maintain a place in that little girl's life, free from her parents' toxicity and emotional blackmail. If taking the low road was the only way to secure that, then so be it. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the day arrived. I strode into the courthouse with my head held high, Clara's supportive hand on my elbow. My eyes immediately found Nolan and Marley, huddled with their lawyer and wearing matching expressions of thinly veiled contempt. The glares didn't faze me. In that moment, a strange sense of power washed over me. Not the cruel, ego-stroking dominance Marley so often exuded, but a quiet, centered confidence. The knowledge that I was in the right, fighting for something greater than money or pride. As the proceedings began, I stated my case simply and clearly, allowing my lawyer to lay out the evidence with clinical precision. Nolan and Marley's team tried to poke holes, to frame me as a vengeful, overreacting old woman blindsided by circumstance. But their flimsy rebuttals crumbled under the weight of hard facts and documentation. Throughout it all, I kept my gaze trained forward, avoiding Marley's hateful glowers and Nolan's pleading looks. This wasn't about them anymore. It was about justice, pure and simple. And when the judge's gavel finally fell with a resounding thud, that's exactly what I received. In light of the overwhelming evidence, the judge's sonorous voice rang out, "I am awarding Mrs. Evelyn Parker the full reimbursement of misappropriated funds. Furthermore, I am granting regularly scheduled visitation rights with her granddaughter to be adhered to under penalty of contempt charges." The words washed over me, their implication taking root deep in my soul. I'd won. We'd won. All the struggle, the anguish, the shattered relationships. It had been worth it in the end. Nolan and Marley's outraged shouts faded into the distance as I basked in the warm glow of vindication. For the first time in a long time, I felt light, untethered from the chains of obligation self-doubt that had bound me for so long. As I left the courtroom, head held high, I knew in that moment I'd never be the same. Victimized and downtrodden no more. I was a woman reborn, forged anew in the fires of hard-won justice. And I had no plans of relinquishing that inner steel, not for anyone ever again. The weeks following the court ruling were a whirlwind. First, there was the not-so-small matter of recouping my stolen savings from Nolan and Marley. Despite their lawyers' empty bravado about appeals and countersuits, the judge's order was ironclad. They had 30 days to repay every cent or face contempt charges. I'll admit, I took a petty sort of pleasure in their visible shock and outrage when the settlement figures were read out. Marley, in particular, looked like she'd been slapped, her perpetual sneer melting into a comical mask of disbelief as the amounts piled up. "This is highway robbery," she'd sputtered, pink spots of rage coloring her cheeks. I merely raised an eyebrow. "No, dear, this is justice." To their credit, they paid up in full by the deadline, perhaps finally realizing I wasn't the feeble-willed pushover they'd grown accustomed to bleeding dry. The money, a staggering sum that nonetheless paled in comparison to the emotional turmoil I'd endured, was promptly reinvested and carefully portioned out. With my financial security firmly re-established, I turned my focus to the other lingering matter, my newly codified rights to regular visitation with Lila. The first few visits were strained, to say the least. "Why are you doing this to us?" Nolan asked for what felt like the 100th time as I arrived to collect Lila one sunny Saturday afternoon. "We're still family." "Exactly," I replied, keeping my tone even and reasonable, a hard-won skill after years of screaming matches and pent-up resentments, which is why I want Lila to have the opportunity to know her grandmother free from the unpleasantness between the rest of us. He opened his mouth, no doubt to argue further, but Marley cut him off with a look of pure venom. "Take the brat and get out, but don't think this is over." Her icy words landed like a slap, resurrecting that flicker of residual hurt I'd carried for so long. But I refused to show it, gathering Lila into my arms and depositing a gentle kiss on her brow. "Ready for our adventure, Pumpkin?" Lila's sunny smile, so reminiscent of the joy I used to bask in before the turmoil, was all the reassurance I needed. With a final, wordless nod to Nolan and Marley, I turned and led my granddaughter out to the car. Our outings quickly became something I cherished, those pain-laced months of despair fading into the rear view with each squeal of delight, every new inside joke shared between just the two of us. In those moments, it was just me and my Lila bear, the world and all its ugliness suspended in perfect equilibrium. Of course, Marley did her best to sour even those sanctuaries of peace, making frequent snide comments about brainwashing the poor girl against them, or concerned remarks about whether I could really keep up with an energetic child's needs these days. Her needling only reinforced my determination. With Clara's support and my newly rebuilt financial security, I sought out new hobbies and social circles tailored to creating an enriching environment for Lila: art classes, nature hikes, even a children's book club at the local library. And perhaps against her own better judgment, Marley's sniping began to lose its potent sting. "She's just jealous, you know," Clara remarked one afternoon as we watched Lila frolic on the swings, rosy-cheeked and beaming, "of the bond you two share." I hummed in acknowledgement, silently studying my granddaughter's unbridled joy. There was a time when Marley's approval meant everything, when her barbs could rent me asunder with casual ease. But not anymore. In getting my freedom and a judge-mandated stake in Lila's life, I'd also stumbled upon an even greater gift: the ability to firmly define my own worth. What others thought or spat about me no longer held any sway, because as I gazed at Lila's bright, innocent smile, I knew that this, being present as her grandmother, her safe harbor in the storm, was enough. More than enough, really. All the struggle, the shattered relationships and personal awakenings, it had all led me here, to this new beginning. And I had no intention of slipping backwards into the quagmire of doubt and self-pity ever again. As Lila ran up, rosy cheeks glowing and arms outstretched, I pulled her into a fierce hug. In her sweet, scented warmth, I felt the ragged edges of past wounds finally, truly begin to heal over. The future was finally, blessedly, my own again. And I had no plans of relinquishing that hard-won freedom for anything.
The air in my father's study hung heavy with the scent of power old books, polished mahogany, and the faint tang of leather that seemed to whisper of legacies I'd never inherit. I stood there, Natalie Johnson, 28 years old, watching the walls, rich and dark as secrets. Close in around me, my father's pen scratched across the paper, a sound sharper than it had any right to be, as if it were carving my name out of existence. He slid the stack across the desk with a finality that made my chest tighten. "There," he said, voice clipped. "It's done. The full $5 million trust fund goes to Teresa." Just like that. I was erased. I stood rooted to the spot, my hands clasped tightly behind me, as my sister Teresa lingered by the window, her silhouette framed against the late afternoon light. She half turned, a smirk flickering across her lips, though she tried to hide it. Her eyes gleamed with a victory she didn't need to voice. At 33, she was everything our parents revered a partner at Williams and Edwards, a lawyer draped in tailored suits and accolades. My mother, perched in the oversized leather chair behind me, let out a sigh, rehearsed and heavy. "If only you'd followed a traditional path. Natalie," she said, her words soft but cutting. "If you'd gone to law school like Teresa, applied yourself properly." "I did apply myself," I said, my voice low, steady, refusing to fracture under their scrutiny. I could feel my father's gaze sharpen, his chair creaking as he leaned forward. "Playing with computers in that cramped apartment isn't applying yourself," he snapped, his tone laced with disdain. "It's a hobby, not a future. Teresa's a partner at a top firm. You build websites for coffee shops and pet stores. You live in a shoebox in Manhattan." His words stung, but I didn't flinch. I could have told him then about the fintech platform I'd built from nothing. The algorithms humming in Silicon Valley's shadows, valued at $450 million. But I didn't. Their world of corner offices and framed degrees wouldn't understand. Teresa shifted, a fleeting softness in her eyes, the ghost of the sister who once shared late-night secrets. "Natalie," she began, but I raised a hand, cutting her off. "It's okay. Teresa, congratulations on the partnership. You earned it." I turned to the door, my mother's voice trailing after me. "Won't you join us for dinner? Your father booked Le Bernardin to celebrate." I paused, glancing at the walls lined with their achievements, none mine. "I have a meeting," I said, stepping out. The door closed behind me, and with it, a chapter I'd long outgrown. The city's pulse thrummed through the taxi's windows as I rode back to Manhattan. The hum of the engine a quiet counterpoint to the thoughts swirling in my mind. I wasn't angry, not even sad, just clear. Like the fog of my family's expectations had finally lifted. In their eyes, I was still the girl tinkering with code in a shoebox apartment. But they hadn't seen what I'd built. Natalie Johnson, was no longer their disappointment. I was the architect of something revolutionary. And tonight, I'd step back into the world where I belonged. My apartment door clicked shut behind me, and I kicked off my heels, the hardwood cool against my feet. The cramped space my father mocked opened into my home office, where 3 large screens glowed softly, alive with scrolling numbers and graphs. This was Atna Adaptive Trading Heuristics and Neural Analytics, my creation. A system that sifted through millions of data points in seconds to predict stock market movements with an accuracy no human trader could touch. It had outperformed traditional algorithms by 40% in our beta tests. And the word was spreading. I ran my fingers through my hair, letting the faint hum of the computers ground me. This was my empire, built line by line, while they dined at Le Bernardin, toasting a trust fund I didn't need. My phone buzzed on the desk, Sophia's name lighting up the screen. My CTO, brilliant and relentlessly optimistic, had texted VC meeting moved to tomorrow a.m. "You ready?" I smiled, typing back. "More than ready. Let's change the game." Sophia was the heart of our team, her faith in Atna as unwavering as mine. I pulled up our pitch deck, the slides crisp with data from our latest tests. Banks were already circling, whispering about early access to a system that could reshape finance. But I wasn't here for quick cash. I wanted control, scale, legacy. Another buzz interrupted my thoughts, a message from Teresa. "Sorry about Dad. You know how he is. The trust fund doesn't matter. right? You're fine with your computer stuff." Her words, meant to soothe, landed like a subtle jab. Computer stuff, as if I weren't rewriting the rules of wealth itself. I stared at the screen, then replied, "Thanks. Teresa, enjoy your dinner." I set the phone down, refocusing on the pitch. Tomorrow wasn't just a meeting, it was a pivot point. Later, Sophia's face appeared on a video call, her usual energy tempered by concern. "How'd it go with the family?" she asked. I sighed, leaning back, as expected. "Dad signed the trust fund over to Teresa. They're probably clinking glasses at Le Bernardin now." Sophia shook her head. "Their loss. Ready to show those VCs what real success looks like?" I nodded. Pulling up fresh test results, Atnay's predictions were tightening, trends sharper than ever. "Actually," I said, a spark igniting. "What if we don't take their money?" Sophia blinked. "Wait, what?" "This is a $21 million deal at a $450 million valuation." I sat up straighter. That's small thinking. "These results. We're ahead of the curve. If we go public in a year, we will keep control. Partnerships. Not cash. That's the play." Silence stretched. Then Sophia grinned. "You don't want a company, you want an empire." I matched her smile. "Exactly. And we're building it on our terms." The screens flickered. Numbers racing. Proof that my father's dismissal was just noise. The world hadn't seen the last of me, not even close. The Manhattan skyline glittered beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows of our new ATNA office. A sleek temple of glass and steel that felt like a declaration of arrival. I stood at the edge of the open-plan space, coffee in hand, watching our engineers hunch over laptops, their screens alive with ATNA's latest simulations. The air buzzed with focus, a quiet electricity that mirrored the city's pulse below. 5 months had passed since I walked out of my father's study, and in that time, we'd transformed from a whispered rumor in Silicon Valley to a force the financial world couldn't ignore. My decision to forgo venture capital had sharpened our path. Partnerships, not payouts, were our currency now. And today, we'd test that gamble. Sophia bounded over, tablet glowing with fresh data. "You won't believe this," she said, her voice a mix of awe and urgency. "Atna caught a spike in retail trading patterns last night, predicted a 3% jump in a mid-cap stock before the market opened. It was right, down to the decimal." I leaned in, the numbers on her screen a constellation of proof. Our system wasn't just forecasting trends, it was rewriting how markets breathed. "Run it again," I said, "and prep the demo. Goldman Sachs is here in an hour." Sophia nodded, already halfway back to her desk, but not before tossing me a grin that said we were on the cusp of something massive. Before I could follow, the intercom crackled. "Ms. Johnson, a Mr. Mason Williams from Williams and Edwards is here," our receptionist said. My heart skipped. Teresa's law firm, the bastion of my family's ideals, had sent its senior partner unannounced. I straightened my blazer and met him in the conference room, where his silver hair and polished suit screamed old money. "Miss Johnson," he said, handshake firm. "Our clients in finance are buzzing about Atna. We're here to explore partnerships." His charm was practiced, but I caught the flicker of surprise in his eyes. This wasn't the computer hobbyist he'd expected. "Curious," I said, leaning back, my tone light but pointed. "Does my sister know you're here?" His smile faltered. Just for a second. "Teresa, no. This is confidential. Though I was surprised to learn you're her sister. She's never mentioned you." The word stung, but I masked it with a half smile. "She doesn't talk about me much. Let me guess she never mentioned a sister who plays with computers." He looked faintly embarrassed, and I let the moment hang before continuing. "Atna isn't a side project, Mr. Williams. It's a system that sees what your clients can't. If you want a seat at this table, it's not about money, it's about access to your networks." He nodded, recalibrating. But before he could respond, Sophia poked her head in. "Goldman's here." I stood, smoothing my skirt. "I appreciate the visit." Mr. Williams. But I have another meeting. Our legal team will follow up if your firm is serious. His expression shifted at the mention of Goldman Sachs. A mental note scribbled behind his eyes. As he left, I felt a quiet thrill, not just at turning the tables on Teresa's world, but at the realization that we were no longer chasing validation. We were setting the terms. In the conference room, 5 Goldman executives waited, their polished demeanor barely masking their hunger for what AT&A could do. I stepped to the front, my voice steady. Ladies and gentlemen, sign these NDAs, and I'll show you how we're rewriting the rules of wealth. The room leaned forward, and I knew we'd already won. The AT&A office hummed with a new intensity, the kind that comes when the world starts watching. Our Manhattan headquarters, once a vision in my mind, now pulsed with engineers and analysts. Their screens a mosaic of data that told a story no one else could read. Weeks after the Goldman demo, whispers about Aetna had turned into a roar. Banks, hedge funds, even tech giants were circling, eager for a piece of our predictive power. But with attention came scrutiny, and as I stood by the window, watching dawn break over the financial district, I knew today would test us in ways no pitch deck could prepare for. Sophia burst through the door, her usual calm replaced by a barely contained excitement. "You need to see this," she said, thrusting her tablet at me. The screen showed AT&A's latest simulation. It had flagged a subtle shift in social media sentiment, cross-referenced it with trading anomalies, and predicted a Morgan Stanley merger 3 days before it hit the news. "If we'd been alive," Sophia said, voice trembling with awe, "we'd have made billions." I squinted at the numbers, my pulse quickening. "Is this verified?" I asked. She nodded. "Triple-checked. All public data, no insider info. Aetna just connects the dots better than anyone." I exhaled, the weight of it sinking in. We weren't just ahead of the curve, we were redrawing it. But brilliance invites questions. And Jonathan, our head of legal, confirmed the next hurdle. "The SEC wants a meeting next week," he said over a call, his tone measured but urgent. "They're intrigued by our compliance framework, but want to understand Aetna before it disrupts markets." I nodded, unsurprised. A system this powerful would raise eyebrows, and I welcomed the chance to prove we played clean, set it up. I said, "Let's show them we're not just innovative, we're untouchable." Jonathan chuckled, a rare crack in his stoic facade. "They're not ready for you." Amid the whirlwind, my phone buzzed with a message from Teresa. "Hey, parents are worried. Your old number doesn't work. Everything okay?" I smiled at the irony. My old number belonged to the apartment I'd left behind, replaced by this $55 million tower 6 blocks from Wall Street. To them, I was still tinkering in a shoebox. "I'm fine. Just busy with work," I replied, my focus already back on the SEC prep. Their world felt like a distant echo, drowned out by the rhythm of our mission. The industry's hunger for AT&A grew insatiable. After Goldman signed on, JP Morgan and Citi reached out, their offers laced with promises of exclusive access. I met each with the same response: partnerships, not control. "We don't need your capital," I told a Citi exec over coffee, my voice calm but firm. "We need your networks to scale faster on our terms." He blinked, unused to being dictated to, but nodded. The deals we struck weren't just contracts, they were bridges to a future we'd architect ourselves. As the SEC meeting loomed, I gathered the team in the war room, whiteboards scribbled with compliance protocols. "They'll come at us hard," I said, scanning their faces, "not because we're wrong, but because we're first. Show them Aetna's clean, and we'll walk out as pioneers." Sophia raised her coffee mug, a mock toast. To rewrite history, the room laughed. But the stakes were real. That night, alone in my office, I watched the city's lights flicker, a reminder of how far we'd come and how much further we'd go. The SEC wasn't a threat, it was a stage, and I was ready to take the spotlight. The New York Stock Exchange loomed before me, its marble facade a monument to wealth and ambition. Yet today it felt like a stage set for my story. Dawn painted the sky in streaks of gold as I stepped from the car, the air crackling with anticipation. Reporters swarmed the entrance, their cameras flashing like fireflies, their voices a chorus of speculation about ATNA's $900 million valuation. I smoothed the collar of my tailored Chanel suit, the Wall Street Journal tucked under my arm, its headline screaming, ATNA to launch biggest tech IPO of the year. The SEC meeting had come and gone, our compliance framework earning nods of approval. And now, months of partnerships and sleepless nights converged on this moment. I wasn't just here to ring a bell, I was here to rewrite the rules of the game. Inside, the trading floor buzzed with an electric fervor, traders and bankers orbiting our team like planets drawn to a new sun. Sophia met me at the entrance, her usual hoodie traded for a sharp blazer, her eyes alight with pride. Atna's running like a dream, she whispered, leaning in, real-time predictions at 98% accuracy. The floor's on fire. I nodded, my gaze sweeping the room, landing on the front row where my family sat. My father's face was a tapestry of emotions, pride warring with regret, confusion softening into awe. My mother dabbed her eyes, overwhelmed, while Teresa stared, her polished lawyer's mask replaced by something raw, like she was seeing me for the first time. As I passed, my father stood, his voice low. We had no idea. The words hung heavy. An admission years in the making. I met his eyes. My response steady, unyielding. You never asked. Before he could reply, the exchange president called me to the podium. The room falling silent, I stepped forward. The weight of every late night, every doubted line of code, settling into my bones. 4 years ago, I began, my voice clear, resonant. I was coding in a tiny Manhattan apartment. People laughed, called it a waste of time. They saw a hobby. I saw the future. The crowd leaned in, hanging on my words. Today, Atna processes more market data in a second than Wall Street could analyze in a month. It doesn't just react, it understands. And this, I said, pausing to meet my father's gaze, is only the beginning. The bell rang. A clarion call that echoed through the hall. The big board lit up, Atna's stock price flashing, then soaring past projections. Cheers erupted. A tidal wave of sound traders high-fived. Team members hugged. Some even cried. My stake in the company, now worth $450 million, dwarfed the trust fund my father had given away. But the money wasn't the victory. It was this standing here. Seen, undeniable, proving not them wrong, but myself right. Reporters surged forward, shouting questions. Youngest female CEO to take a company public, one called. A new era in trading tech. Another echoed. I smiled, letting the moment wash over me. A tide I'd earned. As the ceremony wound down, I caught Sophia's eye across the room. She mouthed, "We did it." And I nodded, the weight of our shared vision grounding me. My family lingered nearby, their presence a quiet question mark. But I wasn't ready to answer, not yet. The trading floor still hummed, the numbers still climbed, and I stood at the center, not just a CEO, but a force who'd turned a dream into a global reckoning. This wasn't the end. It was the spark of something even greater. The private room at Le Bernardin glowed with candlelight, its elegance a far cry from the sterile study where my journey began. I sat at the head of the table, the clink of wine glasses and murmur of laughter weaving a warmth I hadn't expected. My team mingled with my family, the air thick with celebration. But beneath it, a current of unfinished business. The IPO's success still pulsed in my veins. Atine's stock had closed at double our projected value, making me a billionaire by day's end. Yet as I watched my father try to explain my triumph to his country club friends, pride tangled with awkwardness. I realized the true victory lay not in numbers, but in what came next. Teresa approached me, her lawyer's poise softened by a humility I hadn't seen before. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice catching. "I looked into Atna after Mason's visit. I bought stock in every partner you signed. I believed in you. even if I didn't say it. Her confession hung between us, a bridge over years of distance. I smiled, gently but firmly. You saw what you wanted to see, like they all did, but there's room for you now. Her eyes widened. Wait, are you offering me a job? I leaned in, a spark of mischief in my voice, a chance to build something bigger than both of us, ready to dive into computer stuff. Sis, she laughed, a sound of relief, and nodded. My parents joined us, my mother's eyes still misty. We're family, she said softly. We should have supported you. My father, usually so commanding, managed only a respectful nod, his silence louder than any apology. I stood, raising my glass. You're right, we are family. That's why I reserved this room tonight. Let's celebrate what we've all built. The irony wasn't lost on my father, his face twitching as he recalled dismissing me here months ago. Now, he lifted his glass, a quiet acknowledgement of the empire I'd forged. Later, at Atina Tower, I walked through the lobby, the logo gleaming above like a beacon. A young intern sat cross-legged on a bench, typing code on her laptop. Her focus a mirror of my years ago. I paused, struck by the echo. Keep at it, I said, smiling. The biggest stories start in the smallest spaces. She looked up, recognition dawning. I read about you, how you built this from nothing. My parents think coding's a dead end. I nodded, seeing myself in her defiance. Mine did too. Hold that vision. They'll read your story soon enough. In the elevator, rising to my office, I thought of legacy, not the kind handed down, but the kind carved from doubt and dreams. Atiena wasn't just changing markets, it was a testament to what happens when you believe in the impossible. As the doors opened, the city sprawled below, a canvas of light and possibility. I'd built this, line by line, choice by choice, and in doing so, I'd shown the world that the truest success is the one you claim for yourself. Have you ever stood in a room full of laughter and clinking glasses, yet felt like a ghost unseen, unheard your heart? A silent scream beneath a practiced smile. That was me, Arya. 32 years old, cradling my daughter Mia under the golden Napa sun, my wine-colored dress clinging to my skin like a borrowed identity. I didn't want to be here at my brother-in-law Mason's wedding, but Ethan, my husband, had insisted, his voice sharp as a blade. This is family Arya. Don't mess it up. So I painted my face, smoothed my hair, and stepped into a world of satin curtains and vanilla-scented candles, unaware that this day would crack open the cage I'd been living in. The Napa resort glowed with elegance, its grounds draped in white silk chairs and pale cream roses woven into an arch that framed Mason and his bride, Emily. Champagne glasses gleamed on banquet tables, catching the soft afternoon light. I stood beside Ethan, Mia's rosy cheeks warm against my hip, her tiny breaths grounding me as exhaustion gnawed at my bones. Mia had been teething, wailing through the nights, leaving me sleepless for weeks. I'd begged to stay home, but Ethan's eyes had narrowed, his pale pink tie adjusted with precision. Look decent, at least he'd said, as if my existence were a prop for his image. I swallowed the ache, my smile a reflex I'd perfected in front of the mirror, and followed him to our seats near the front, just behind the glowing couple. As the ceremony unfolded, Ethan's pride radiated, his gaze fixed on Mason, his little brother. Every time he turned to grin, I swayed Mia gently, her eyelids fluttering shut, her weight a quiet anchor against the storm brewing inside me. I reached for Ethan's hand, a fleeting hope for connection, but he flinched, pulling away as if my touch burned. His whisper sliced through the warm air. Please, Arya, don't embarrass me today. You're just the babysitter. Look good, stay quiet, don't draw attention. The words etched themselves into my spine, not a shock, but a confirmation of how far I'd faded. A faint laugh escaped me, a shield against the splintering pain, and I glanced at the other women wives in elegant dresses, their smiles polished. Did they, too, carry such wounds hidden beneath their grace? The clinking of glasses pulled me back. My mother-in-law rose her voice thick with nostalgia as she shared stories of Ethan and Mason's childhood. My father-in-law followed with tired jokes, earning polite chuckles. Ethan straightened, ready for his speech, his words predictable family love duty, a flawless portrait that erased the cracks beneath. Applause rippled through the white-draped space as he returned his half-smile, brushing past me, his shoulder barely grazing mine before he recoiled. I turned my face breath shallow, the sun itching beneath my makeup. Then Mason took the mic, his voice light. Anyone want to share? Family, friends? Silence hung heavy. I exhaled, relieved, until his eyes found me. Arya, sis-in-law, care to say a few words? Your family now? My heart thudded. Ethan's head whipped toward me, his eyes sharp, his pale face a warning. Don't say anything, he hissed, voice ice. This isn't your moment. Mia stirred her head against my shoulder, anchoring me. I handed her to Ethan's cousin beside me, my legs moving before my mind caught up. The mic was cold in my trembling hand, unfamiliar as I stepped to the small stage, every eye pinning me in place. No music played, no voice warned me, just Ethan's words looping, just the babysitter. Stay quiet. I took a breath, my voice wavering but clear in the hush. Thank you for letting me speak. I didn't plan this, but some things need saying so. No one else carries the weight of silence. Whispers rippled. Ethan leaned forward, jaw tight, but I pressed on. 6 years ago, my wedding was like this, wine flowers, vows in glowing light. I thought I'd found a partner who saw me not just a wife, but a person. But some days you wake up a shadow, folding napkins, changing diapers, smiling just enough to keep appearances, forgetting who you are. Glasses clinked softly, guests shifting awkwardly. I'm not complaining. I'm saying this because someone here has looked in a foggy mirror and not recognized themselves. I forgot my laugh, what it felt like to be needed. Truly needed. I glanced at Mason and Emily. I hope you always see each other through tired days, arguments when words fail. Because when people stop seeing each other, marriage becomes a stage, not a home. I handed the mic back, legs trembling, but steps steady, and returned to my seat. Ethan's silence colder than any words. The sun dipped low as I carried Mia through the iron gates of the wedding venue, the cool Napa breeze brushing my shoulders, jasmine scent mingling with my trembling pulse. Ethan's footsteps crunched behind me, deliberate closing the gate with a clang. I sat on a wooden bench by wisteria vines, Mia asleep in my arms, her steady breaths a lifeline. Ethan loomed, hands on hips, blocking the fading light. What's wrong with you, Arya? His voice simmered low, but laced with fury. You embarrassed my whole family. Everyone's talking. Mom had to say you're struggling with postpartum stress. I tucked Mia's blanket closer, eyes on her. Not him. I didn't say anything untrue, Ethan. He scoffed, voice sharp as frost. You stood there like I'm a monster, like you're some victim trapped at home. Do you know how you've ruined my image in front of 120 guests? His words stung, not new but heavier, as if I were a possession he'd maintained, not a partner. I met his gaze steady for the first time. It's the truth, Ethan. If it embarrasses you, maybe ask why. He froze, then snapped, You're making a fool of yourself. Don't forget who pays for the house, the car, everything. The sentence landed like a slap, cold and deliberate, stripping away any illusion of equality. I stepped back, voice slow. I've faded too long. Ethan, tonight? I remembered I was someone before I became your shadow. He frowned, stepping closer, his frame towering. You're saying dangerous things, Arya? I didn't wait for more. I pushed Mia's stroller toward the parking lot, his footsteps stilled on the stone patio. No call, no apology, just silence, screaming louder than words. At home, I laid Mia in her crib, her room a soft cocoon of moonlight. I stepped into the bathroom, the mirror reflecting a stranger. Dark circles, smudged lipstick, but eyes sharper than I'd seen in years. At 32, I'd let myself shrink, believing Ethan's vision of me, wife, mother, silent. But that woman in the mirror, the one who designed logos and laughed freely a decade ago, stirred. She wasn't gone, just buried under years of quiet cuts. I leaned against the sink, the tile cold under my palms, and traced the contours of my reflection. I'd married Ethan at 26, full of dreams, but somewhere I'd traded them for his approval, his rules. Tonight, his words at the wedding, his anger outside had cracked the fog. I wasn't just Mia's mother or Ethan's wife, I was Arya, with a voice, a past, a future I could still claim. The house was still Ethan, already in bed, scrolling his phone, his back to me, like nothing had shifted. But everything had. I sat by the window, a glass of water gone cold in my hand, and felt the weight of a truth he'd heard, but refused to heed. I was no longer invisible, and I wouldn't let myself disappear. The morning after the wedding, sunlight spilled through the kitchen window, glinting off the coffee pot as Ethan sipped his brew eyes on his phone. Oblivious to the shift inside me, I nodded faintly when he mentioned his mother visiting later, his warning to not make a scene barely registering. As the door clicked shut behind him, I sat at the dining table, Mia napping in her swing, her soft snores a rhythm to my racing thoughts. The mirror's reflection from last night lingered, a woman who refused to vanish. I pulled an old notebook from a drawer, its pages yellowed and a pen that sputtered ink. Not to pour out feelings, but to map a path forward, each line a tether to the self I'd buried. I scribbled first personal account balance, $1, $200 enough for a month's essentials. Then maternity leave savings, $800 dwindling. I listed contacts from my design days, pre-Mia, when I'd crafted logos for local shops. The laptop tucked in the closet since Ethan deemed my work frivolous with his income hummed to life. Its screen glowed with my old design software, a digital relic of who I'd been. I logged into my work email, heart quickening at messages from years ago, praise for a coffee shop's packaging, a yoga center's flyer. I jotted down names: Veronica, the bakery owner, Sam, the coffee roaster. Each felt like a brick in a new foundation. That afternoon, I opened a bank account online, naming it Blue Nest, a quiet vow to build a home for Mia and me free of shadows. $0, but a spark of possibility. As Mia stirred, I typed an email to Veronica, fingers trembling, still freelancing, I'm back. Her reply came by evening. Sophia, perfect timing. Need a full redesign for my vegan bakery's packaging. 260 upfront, tight deadline. You in. My breath caught. 260 could cover Mia's formula for a month. I accepted the decision with a pulse of defiance. That night, under the kitchen's dim lamp, I sketched raisin bread labels, the scratch of my pencil, a whisper of reclaiming. Lauren's message arrived the next day from my college friend, whose brilliance always steadied me. Saw your name on vegan bread at the store. Back designing, I typed, cautious, just small projects testing the waters. Her reply was swift. My company's hiring freelance web designers, supports moms with kids. Want a referral? Doubt crept in. Could I still compete? But her words, you used to blow us away, nudged me forward. I spent the night updating my resume, uploading old projects to Behance, and noting my flexibility as a stay-at-home mom. Each click felt like stitching myself back together, thread by thread. Ethan came home late, his cologne sharp eyes scanning me as I cleared Mia's toys. You seem busy, he said. Not curious, but probing. I shrugged, heart steady, and kept my laptop closed. The kitchen clock ticked, marking the hours I worked after he slept, designing oat cookie boxes, adjusting fonts by lamplight. Veronica's payment hit my account, a small victory, and Lauren's email promised a bigger one. A web design gig, $1, $400 for a nonprofit's education campaign. I stared at Mia's sleeping face. Her tiny hand curled and whispered, we're starting, baby. The notebook's list grew: community clinic 10 miles away, single mom support groups, each line a step toward a door I hadn't yet opened. The Zoom interview for Lauren's referral loomed, a Tuesday at 10 a.m., my first real chance to reclaim my career. I ironed a white blouse, its crisp lines a shield, and asked my neighbor, Mrs. Clara, to watch Mia. Her kind nod a lifeline. Ethan left early, oblivious, his office door shutting out the world I was building. I sat before my laptop, tinted balm on my lips, heart pounding, as Jenna, the interviewer, smiled through the screen. Tell me about your design style, how you manage deadlines and balance work with a young child. I spoke plainly. I'd paused for family, was starting anew, driven by persistence. Her nod felt like permission to exist again. "We need someone who values grit over perfection," she said. "I think that's you." That evening, I cooked dinner lightheaded from possibility when Ethan returned his coat, carrying a faint, unfamiliar cologne. "What did you do today?" he asked, eyes sharp. "Stayed home, took care of Mia." I lied, steady, stirring the pot. He nodded, but as I passed his office with the laundry basket, a faint click chilled me. His laptop opened to my usual workspace. Later, my phone revealed a stranger, an app, Family Safe Pro, tracking my location messages, even the microphone. I hadn't installed it. I deleted it, hands shaking, then checked my laptop. My work 2023 folder was empty, designs gone browser. History wiped. Ethan hadn't yelled, hadn't confronted, but this silent invasion clawed at my skin. The next morning, my mother's call tightened the knot in my chest. "Ethan called yesterday," she said, voice cautious, said, "You're tired, depressed, talking to yourself, neglecting Mia. He's worried you're overworking." I gripped the phone, breathless. "Mom, I'm fine. You know me?" She sighed. "Be careful. If he's saying this to others, you need proof just in case." The words sank in. Ethan wasn't just watching. He was crafting a narrative to cage me, to make my truth sound unhinged. I hung up, body cold, and began to build my armor. I printed bank statements from my Blue Nest account showing Veronica's payment. I screenshot client emails, Lauren's messages, my Behance uploads, and proof of my stability. I created a USB folder Blue Nest backup, hiding it under detergent in the laundry room. A second copy in a Ziploc beneath the fridge and vegetables I researched housing. Finding a women's support center 20 miles away, and emailed, "I have a young child, feel controlled and not physically hurt. Can I get counseling?" Their reply was swift. "You don't need bruises to need help. We're here." I bought a cheap phone with cash, setting a unique password, hiding it under towels for shelter and work emails. Ethan's scrutiny sharpened. "You're out a lot," he said one evening. Eyes fixed as I folded Mia's clothes. "Walks, groceries, fresh air for Mia," I replied, voice even. He said nothing, but his gaze lingered, a predator sensing movement. I sold old dresses online, tucking the cash $50, $30 into a locked box in Mia's stroller. I packed a travel bag, diapers, water bottle, baby outfits hidden in the closet. Each act was a pulse, steady and secret, as the support center's number burned in my mind. I lay awake that night, Ethan's snores a distant hum, the wall clock ticking my plan into shape. The center was 50 miles away, a gravel road to safety. I oiled the back door's hinges, tested the car's quiet start, and whispered to Mia's crib. "Soon we'll be free." Ethan's silent deletions, his whispered lies to my mother, weren't just control. They were a warning. Time was slipping, and I had to move before his narrative trapped me. The night unfurled like a held breath, the house cloaked in a stillness that felt both fragile and final. At 2:37 I slipped from bed. Ethan's soft snores, a steady rhythm across the room. Moonlight traced the edges of Mia's crib, her tiny hand loosely clutching a fleece blanket. I leaned down, my lips brushing her forehead, her warmth tethering me to this moment of no return. The travel bag waited by the door. IDs, Mia's immunization records, 3 days' clothes, $120 in cash, a bank card, and the USB holding my work. I'd rehearsed this path in the dark, each step silent, deliberate, as if the floorboards knew my secret. I carried Mia wrapped in her blanket, her weight a quiet vow against my chest. Downstairs, the back door opened without a creak, its hinges oiled days ago in a stolen moment. The night air swept in cool and sharp with the scent of oak urging me forward. I locked the door behind me. The click a soft farewell to the life I'd outgrown. The car hummed to life, its engine a low murmur, and I eased onto the road, the map on my burner phone glowing with a 50-mile route to the Women's Support Center. Streetlights slid across the windshield, their rhythm like calm breaths carrying me further from the house that had dimmed me. The drive was a pulse of clarity, each mile a loosening of chains. I glanced at Mia in her car seat, her lips parted in sleep, unaware of the dawn we were chasing. The highway stretched, empty stars fading as a pink-orange strip peeked over the horizon. By the time I turned onto the gravel road to the center, the sky softened, promising a morning free of silent breakfasts and probing glares. A woman stood at the gate, silver hair catching the early light, her name tag reading, Martha Intake Coordinator. "You must be Arya," she said, her voice warm. No command in it, just recognition. I nodded, throat tight, the weight of being seen nearly undoing me. She led me into a low building, its lobby bathed in soft light walls painted in gentle pastels, a stillness that didn't choke, but cradled. Upstairs, a small room waited, a twin bed, a crib, a window framing a lavender garden. I placed Mia in the crib, her cheeks rosy. Dreaming undisturbed, Martha's hand grazed my shoulder. "Rest now. We'll plan your next steps when you're ready." I pulled the sheer curtain, sat on the bed, and let tears fall. Not from fear, but from the relief of choosing myself. The notebook in my bag held a single new line scrawled in the car. "We are free by noon." Lauren's message lit my phone. "You okay?" I typed one word left, and her call came instantly. "I'm here," she said, voice fierce. "Lawyer, accountant, anything, just say it." I smiled. The first real one in months. That afternoon, Jenna emailed confirming my part-time design role, a $1 $400 project to start. The center's quiet hum, soft footsteps, distant murmurs felt like a chorus of women rebuilding. I unpacked Mia's clothes, hung a spare dress in the closet, and tucked the USB beneath the mattress. Ethan's silence loomed, a storm gathering, but here, with lavender drifting through the window, I felt the ground beneath me solid mine. 2 weeks later, I stood in a Sacramento restaurant's modest lobby, white tablecloths and homemade desserts replacing Napa's grandeur. Mason and Emily's post-wedding gathering was intimate, a nod to family who'd missed the main event. Mason's call had been earnest. "What you said at the wedding, people still talk about it? Share more if you're willing." I'd hesitated, knowing Ethan would be there, but Martha's words echoed. "We don't need to scream to be heard, just stand." So I stood, mic in hand, Mia sleeping in Lauren's arms at the room's edge, Martha nodding from the back, her presence a quiet blessing. I took a breath, voice steady, despite a faint tremble. "Thank you for this chance to speak again. Last time I talked about seeing each other in marriage. Today it's about seeing yourself." Ethan stood by his mother, arms crossed, his crisp shirt a stark contrast to his unyielding gaze. I lived in a house with every comfort, yet shrank daily, not from blows or hunger, but from words that cut quietly, looks that erased me, a life reduced to babysitting, cooking, existing for others' ease. The room stilled, silverware hushed. I didn't leave to stop loving. I left because love must flow both ways. Patience alone changes nothing unless actions face their weight. Ethan's shoulders tightened, but he didn't move. I didn't walk away for revenge, but because I loved myself more than someone's comfort, because Mia deserves a mother respected, not erased. Some call me unstable, selfish, a family breaker. I stand here calm, clear, not defending my choice. The truth needs no defense. I handed the mic back, no applause, needed the silence heavy with understanding. Passing Ethan, I met his eyes unyielding, and he said nothing. His silence louder than any protest. Back at the shelter, dusk painted the hills pink. Mia asleep in my arms as I carried her inside. Martha opened our door. Her smile wordless, knowing I set Mia in her crib. Her breath a soft cadence, and sat on the bed, notebook open to, "We are free." My lawyer warned of a messy custody fight. Ethan's legal team painting him as the perfect father, me as reckless, but I was ready. Lauren, Jenna, Martha. My screenshots, bank statements, and designs were my shield. My part-time job, crafting layouts for a public education campaign, filled mornings with purpose. Mia in her chair, jazz humming, my laptop alive with color. One evening, as Mia grabbed my hand, her eyes sparkling, I held her close, her hair soft against my cheek. "We've made it, baby," I whispered, "and I'll never lose myself again." Moonlight spilled through the window, cream walls and creaky fan framing a life chosen, not endured. The trial loomed Ethan's lies a shadow, but I had truth allies and a plan. Each day I designed mothered lived, not surviving, but rising free for Mia for me. What does it feel like to step into someone else's life, to wear their name like a borrowed dress, knowing every stitch might unravel with a single misstep? I stood in the dressing room of Gracefield Church in Chicago, the air heavy with the scent of lilies and luxury perfume, staring at a wedding gown that wasn't mine. Its white silk shimmered like a promise I hadn't made, its folds a trap, smiling just for me. At 26, fresh from an interior design degree, I never imagined my future would begin with a lie sealed by a ring meant for my sister Erica. But as my mother's hands gripped my wrists, her voice slicing through the quiet like a winter wind, I knew there was no escape. "Erica isn't coming," she said, her eyes unyielding. "You have to take her place, Brianna." There's no other choice. For as long as I could remember, I'd been the shadow in our family, the second daughter who owed everything. Erica, 3 years older, was the sun golden radiant, the center of every plan. When she vanished 3 days before her wedding to Elliot Warren, a blind millionaire who'd built an empire in medical tech, she left only a text. "Brianna, I can't live like this. I'm sorry." My mother didn't flinch. "If this wedding falls through, we lose everything," she told me, her gaze sharp as a blade. "You owe us." That word owe had defined me, for being born second, for not being Erica, for daring to want a life of my own. Now it meant stepping into her engagement, her voice, her world. 6 months ago, it started as a favor. Erica found talking to a blind man unsettling. "It throws me off," she'd said, tossing her hair. My mother just looked at me. "Your voice is close enough. Help her out." So I did. I learned to mimic Erica's laugh, her breezy tone, her quick replies. On every call with Elliot, I was her memorizing his habits. Black coffee at 7 a.m., a pause when he was tired, the way his breath softened in long silences. He never suspected each conversation was a performance, and I played both parts, my heart racing behind the script. Now in this church, the script was real. The gown clung to me, heavy with expectation, as my mother clasped a diamond necklace around my neck, its cold weight sealing my role. The dressing room door closed with a soft click, and I faced the mirror. My reflection wasn't mine. It was Erica's bride, a stranger I'd become beyond the door. The organ hummed, and the crowd waited under the soaring dome of Gracefield Church. The ceremony live-streamed for Elliot's company. My mother's final words echoed. "Walk down the aisle" sign. "The papers, be his wife for a few months. Then disappear if you want." I swallowed my throat tight and stepped toward the aisle. Each step felt like sinking into a void, the polished floor reflecting a woman I didn't know. At the end stood Elliot, his black suit crisp, his face, serene eyes gently closed, as if listening to a world I couldn't hear. My heart pounded. Could he sense the lie in my breath? Deep inside, a whisper asked the question I feared most, if he knew I wasn't. "Erica, would he forgive me? How do you hide a trembling heart when the man beside you seems to hear its every beat?" As I stood under the crystal chandeliers of Gracefield Church, the words "I do" slipped from my lips, tasting like ash. The crowd's applause thundered light, fracturing into 1,000 reflections, but I felt like a ghost in Erica's gown, personally surrounded by satin-draped tables and clinking glasses. My mother glided through the crowd, her smile a polished mask of triumph, while I sat beside Elliot Warren, my husband, a stranger whose gentle hand held mine not tightly, but enough to make me wonder what he sensed. His head tilted slightly, as if catching the rhythm of my uneven breath, and I realized he might see me in ways I couldn't hide. The reception was a blur of wine toasts and forced smiles. I picked at my plate, each bite a test. I feared failing. Elliot said little, but his stillness was alive, noticing every clink of silverware, every pause in my breath. His presence was a quiet weight, not oppressive but piercing, like he was mapping me through sound and silence. When the night ended, we slipped into a sleek black limousine, leaving Chicago's lights behind for the Warren estate some 30 miles away near Lake Magnolia. The city faded, and the world outside became a blur of pines and moonlight. Inside, the silence grew heavy, broken only by the soft hum of tires on pavement and the faint clink of my new ring as I fidgeted. "You're trembling," Elliot said suddenly, his voice low, steady, his eyes still closed. I flinched, forcing a laugh to mask the truth. "Just tired," I murmured, the lie thin as paper. "No," he replied, calm but certain. "Your voice is softer, slower than usual." My fingers tightened on the silk of my dress, scenarios spinning. Deny it, distract him, laugh again. I turned to the window, the lake's dark surface glinting faintly. "Maybe it's the big day," I whispered, barely audible. He didn't answer right away, but his slow inhale felt like he'd caught a scent that didn't belong. "You're not wearing your usual perfume." He added each word a needle through my carefully stitched disguise. I murmured I forgot, and the silence returned thick and watchful. At the Warren estate, the house greeted us with elegant darkness, marble floors, soft lights flickering on as doors opened automatically. Elliot led me to the dining room, no celebration, just 2 chairs, 2 place settings, and a single warm light above. He sat across from me, fingertips grazing the table's edge, and asked, "Do you remember our first call?" My hands clenched under the table. Erica had handed off those calls after a few weeks. I didn't know which was the first, the lake house in Vermont. He said, his voice lower. "You said you'd open a flower shop there, right?" I pressed my lips together, nodding. "Mm-hmm. Yes." He tilted his head, and then his words stopped my breath. Erica never liked flowers. I froze, my heart a drum against my ribs. I wanted to run, but he leaned forward, his voice soft. "Is there something you want to tell me, Brianna?" My name, not Erica's, hung in the air, a quiet truth I wasn't ready to face. Tears stung my eyes, and I knew the mask I'd worn was beginning to crack, exposed by a man who saw without sight. Can a single gesture, like the placement of a teacup, unravel a lie you've woven with every breath? The morning after the wedding, I woke before dawn in the Warren estate, the heavy curtains barely letting slivers of light into the vast bedroom. My hands moved quietly in the kitchen, measuring water to exactly 180-degree time, slicing a lemon for Elliot's tea. No sugar, just the way he liked it. This wasn't about playing Erica anymore. It was about giving him a moment of care, untainted by the role I'd been forced into. As I set the cup on the left side of the table, a habit I hadn't questioned, I felt the weight of my own choices stirring like ripples on Lake Magnolia outside. Elliot descended the stairs, his hand gliding along the polished wooden railing, hair still damp from a shower. He paused as his fingers brushed the teacup's handle, his head tilting slightly. "You place it on the left," he said, as if noting the weather, but the words landed like stones in still water. "That's your dominant side." I froze, the kettle's faint hum filling the silence. Erica never noticed such things, and I hadn't either until now. His voice carried no accusation, but it pierced the veil I'd worn, making me wonder how much he already knew. I poured the tea, my hands steady, despite the echo of my mother's warnings. Don't let him find out. Days blurred into quiet routines, each one a step away from Erica's shadow. I stopped calling the staff, choosing instead to wipe down tables, change the sheets, and rearrange the library, a room untouched since Elliot's accident. I ran my fingers over his books, their leather covers worn, some with notes in his neat handwriting. "Thank you for reading this." The man who wrote those wasn't a millionaire. He was someone who loved stories, who cared. One afternoon, I guided Elliot through the garden, my hand on his wrist describing the lavender's soft purple and the burnt orange maples, their leaves crunching underfoot. He walked without his cane, trusting my steps. When I mentioned the deep red dahlias, he stopped. "Why don't you talk about tulips anymore?" His voice was gentle, but it pinned me. Tulips were Erica's, not mine. I forced a smile, my heart racing. "Other flowers deserve mention," I said, hoping he'd let it pass. That night, in the living room's warm glow, I read to him a short story about a girl who found herself only after shedding a false name. My voice trembled, not from fear, but from the truth it carried. When I finished, Elliot spoke, his head turned toward me. Your voice is warmer now, your touch softer, not like someone playing a part. My hands clutched my nightgown, the book heavy in my lap. If you're someone else, he added, I think I might like that person more. My chest tightened, not with dread, but with a fragile hope. The curtain I'd hidden behind was fraying, and for the first time I wanted it to fall to let him see me. Not Erica, but the woman who chose to stay. What happens when the truth you've buried claws its way to the surface, demanding to be heard? I was dusting the library's empty picture frames, the scent of old books mingling with pine from the open window, when a sharp knock shattered the quiet. The door swung open, and my mother stormed in her beige dress, tailored to a razor's edge, a glittering handbag like armor. Erica followed, her golden curls, perfect heels clicking on the hardwood, as if she owned the Warren estate. We need to talk, my mother said, her eyes scanning the room like a general assessing a battlefield. I set the cloth down, my pulse quickening, knowing this was no visit. It was a reclamation. Erica's laugh cut through the air, sharp and mocking. Do you think you're in some romance novel, Brianna? Your role was to fill in, not take over. My mother stepped closer, her voice low, slicing. Elliot's about to open company shares to the State Medical Alliance. I turned, gripping a book on the table, its leather cover worn a note in Elliot's handwriting inside. Every road has a turn. What matters is who's holding your hand. I faced them again, my voice no longer trembling. You think I'm weak. Erica thinks I'm a dreamer, but I've been real. You ran from a good man, and now you're back for a title, not him. Erica's glare faltered, a hollow flicker in her eyes, as if she saw what she'd lost. The door opened, and Elliot stood there, hand resting on the frame, his voice calm but unyielding. I suppose I should let everyone say what they need to. My mother inhaled sharply, Erica stiffened, but Elliot walked toward me. I'd like a walk, Brianna. Will you lead me? My name in his voice wasn't betrayal. It was a choice. We stepped onto the lakeside path, some 200 feet from the estate, fallen leaves, soft underfoot, the air sharp with pine. The sky was a muted, bluish-gray clouds, drifting like unspoken thoughts. His hand rested on my arm, needing little guidance, as if my heartbeat was enough. Silence held us until he spoke. I figured it out a long time ago. I stopped, my breath catching. Since when? He chuckled, soft, like he'd solved a puzzle. The tea on the left, the chrysanthemums you loved, the way you touched my hand, like it was sacred. My throat tightened, memories reflecting like broken glass. Why not say anything? We sat on a stone bench beneath red maples, his fingers tracing its edge. I didn't want a forced confession. I needed to know, were you staying for obligation fear? Or me? Tears stung my eyes, but I didn't hide them. I stayed for you, I whispered, and in his quiet nod, I felt the lie dissolve, leaving only us, raw and real by the lake's still edge. What does it mean to be seen, truly seen, when the eyes meeting yours have only known darkness? In the cold hallway of Stamford Hospital, Connecticut, I sat on a plastic chair, my hands clasped so tightly, my knuckles ached. The recovery room door loomed ahead, its silence louder than the monitor's faint beeps echoing from within. Elliot had endured 7 grueling hours of surgery to restore his sight, a gamble, with odds no doctor could pin down. I'd held his hand before they wheeled him away, his fingers steady, his voice soft, with hope, not for his eyes but for us. Now, as the nurse beckoned me inside, my heart plummeted each step toward him, heavy with the fear that seeing me might unravel everything we'd built. The room was stark white sunlight streaming through a narrow window, casting sharp shadows on the tiled floor. Elliot lay still, bandages loosened around his eyes, his chest rising with slow, deliberate breaths. I stood frozen, afraid to touch him, watching his pulse like it might slip away. Then his eyes opened slowly, cautiously, pale blue and shimmering, as if they'd borrowed light from a world he'd forgotten. He blinked, adjusting to the brightness, and his gaze swept the room before settling on me. No flinch, no confusion, just a quiet recognition, like he'd always known my face. "You're not Erica," he said, his voice gentle, not accusing a truth he'd carried long before this moment. I nodded, my throat too dry to speak. I stepped closer, my hand resting on the bed's edge. The metal cool under my fingers. I was going to leave after the wedding. I confessed, my voice barely above a whisper. I didn't think I'd be brave enough to stay. His eyes, clear and searching, held mine. But you did. He said the words, a bridge between us. I swallowed, the weight of my deception lifting. Because of you, not the man my family saw, but the one who listened, who lived in silence, but never quietly. Elliot exhaled his hand, rising just enough to brush my fingers a touch, as soft as the lakeside breeze. I feared one thing, he said, his voice low. That if I saw again, the world wouldn't match what I felt, that the people who stayed would be gone. My grip tightened on his hand, the sunlight warm on my skin. I can't promise perfection. I said only honesty. He looked at me, his eyes tracing lines I'd never shown him, my trembling lips, my tear-streaked cheeks, as if reading a story he'd already memorized. If you're here tomorrow, he said, stay. Not because I need you, but because I want to start over with you. My heart skipped, not from fear, but from a quiet courage blooming within. I sat beside him, the chair creaking softly, and whispered, then tomorrow I'll be the first thing you see. His fingers curled around mine, a silent vow, and in that sterile room beneath the weight of truth, we found something unbreakable, a beginning born not of sight, but of choice. How do you measure a life rebuilt, not in grand gestures, but in the quiet rhythm of days shared without pretense? A year later, I opened the door of our cabin in Ashland, Oregon, the morning mist curling over the lake like a gentle secret. The air carried the scent of red maples and tall pines, their branches swaying in a breeze that felt like forgiveness. No chandeliers, no live-streamed ceremonies, just a wooden roof and a life I'd chosen, not borrowed. Beyond the porch stretched the Horizon Center, a haven for the newly blind named by Elliot, to honor the light everyone could chase, seen or unseen. Here, by this lake, a few hundred feet from the forest's edge, we'd built something real, and it began with us. Each morning I led orientation sessions, guiding students along trails, teaching them to feel the winds shift, hear footsteps echo, sense the earth's pulse under their soles. Some arrived trembling, their world still dark, but after weeks, they'd reach the lake's shore alone. Their steps sure. Elliot taught music, his piano at the room's heart. No lesson plans, just stories and laughter notes that carried memories. I'd linger outside, watching his hands dance over the keys, retelling moments of joy. Sometimes he'd pause to talk, asking students how sound reshaped their world, and those conversations meant more than any song. Evenings found us on the porch, tea steaming at 180-degree Yakin, the lake reflecting stars. Our silence wasn't empty. It was peace, a language we'd learned together. One evening, as the wind rustled the pines, I asked, do you ever miss the life you left? Elliot's eyes, now clear, gazed at the water, quiet as glass. No, he said. I lived in noise once, never hearing what mattered. His hand brushed mine, and I knew he meant me. The woman who'd stepped into his life with a lie, but stayed with truth. Visitors came curious about the millionaire who chose simplicity, and Elliot would smile, inviting them to a class. A boy, Liam, barely 12, asked him once, weren't you scared to see someone who wasn't, who you thought? Elliot turned to me, his voice soft. I saw the right person, just not at the right time. Liam didn't grasp it fully, but I did, my heart swelling with the weight of being chosen. Erica drifted back into my thoughts. Sometimes she'd left again, seeking her own path, and I harbored no bitterness. We all wander. Perhaps she was finding her way. For me, the greatest light wasn't the Oregon sun or the lake's shimmer. It was Elliot who'd believed in me before his eyes confirmed it. One autumn morning I heard his piano, a melody not sad, not joyful, but a story unfolding, note by note. I stood at the classroom door unseen until he paused and smiled. I'm writing the final part, he said. I sat beside him, my hand on the keys, not playing, just feeling. For the song, I asked. For everything, he replied, the before the beginning and you. We wrote that melody daily, not with ink, but in every trail we walked, every student we guided, every breath we shared. Beneath this simple roof, we'd built a love that didn't shout yet silenced every doubt I'd ever carried, proving the truest light lies in a heart that chooses you, flaws and all. The crystal wine glass slipped from my fingers, shattering into 1,000 glints on the walnut table, its crimson contents bleeding into the pristine cloth. A thin line of blood traced my palm, but the sting was a whisper compared to the icy weight crushing my chest. 24 pairs of eyes. Harrington eyes sharp with curiosity and a gleam of satisfaction locked onto me, as if I were a specimen pinned under glass. I am Abigail, 34. An artist whose dreams have always been a punchline to my husband's family. This Thanksgiving dinner 10 miles from the city's pulse was no mere gathering. It was an ambush, and the ochre envelope thrown before me held a truth sharper than any shard on that table. The dining room of the Harrington estate, a 5,000-square-foot monument to legacy, gleamed with excess silver candelabras, porcelain plates, and the faint scent of rosemary from the turkey. I sat beside Lindsay, my best friend who'd insisted on joining me tonight, her presence a tether to sanity. Across the table, Brandon, my husband of 6 years, carved the bird with mechanical precision. His jaw tight, Mildred, his mother, presided at the head, her silver hair coiled like a crown, her gaze slicing through me. Julie, Brandon's sister, swirled her wine, her smirk a blade honed over years of jabs at my little art studio. The air was thick with unspoken judgment, and I felt it coil around me, tightening with every clink of cutlery. "What's this?" I asked, my voice steady, despite the tremble in my hand as I reached for the envelope. The room stilled. Brandon's eyes, once warm, now cold as slate met mine. "Divorce papers," he said, his tone flat as if announcing we'd run out of cranberry sauce. A gasp escaped Lindsay, but the Harringtons remained unmoved. Mildred sipped her wine, setting the glass down with a clink that echoed like a gavel. "We thought it gentler to do this with family present." She said each word, a royal decree, her lips curling as if the word gentler were a gift. Julie's smirk widened, and cousins I'd thought neutral exchanged knowing glances. Gentler for whom I wanted to scream, but the words caught in my throat. "You filed for divorce at Thanksgiving dinner." I repeated each syllable, a stone dropping into the silence. Mildred leaned forward, her icy eyes pinning me. "Sweetheart, everyone here knows you were never a fit for this family." Her voice dripped with condescension, and Julie chimed in. "Oh, come on, everyone knows that studio behind the house is just your excuse to avoid a real job." Laughter rippled through the room, sharp and unrestrained, even from those I'd hoped were allies. I searched Brandon's face for a flicker of the man who once carried paint cans to my studio, but he looked away. "A stranger in the house we'd shared. We just want to help you wake up," Mildred added, dabbing her lips with a napkin. "This family needs someone sturdier." Beneath the table, Lindsay's hand found mine, her squeeze a lifeline. My plate, turkey slices, golden rolls, cranberry sauce turned my stomach. Humiliation burned, but something else stirred a spark, long buried. In my purse, tucked away for nearly a year, was a document Brandon had signed. In a drunken haze on our 6th anniversary, the deed to this very house transferred to me. He'd forgotten by morning, but I hadn't. I rose, blood dripping onto the tablecloth, staining its perfection. "You're right," I said, my voice low but steady. "I don't fit with this family. I'm far above your standards." Brandon's head snapped up, his face flushing. "What?" Mildred's composure faltered. "Lindsay, can you take me to the hospital?" I asked, turning to my friend whose eyes widened but nodded. My hands bleeding. "Oh, and Mildred, wash that tablecloth soon. Bloodstains if you leave it, like deed transfers." The clatter of forks rang out. "What deed transfer?" Mildred's voice cracked, her authority slipping. I smiled, cold and small. "Happy Thanksgiving. This may be your last meal in this house." I walked out, ignoring Brandon's calls, Julie's gasps, and the toppled chairs. The amber-lit streets blurred as Lindsay drove, but I didn't look back. The spark in me was now a flame, and I would not let it die. The emergency clinic 3 miles from the Harrington estate smelled of antiseptic and quiet resolve. As the doctor stitched the cut on my palm, 6 neat sutures, I barely flinched. The physical pain was nothing compared to the rupture inside me, a wound years in the making now torn open by that Thanksgiving ambush. And in that sterile room lit by harsh fluorescence, I decided I was done, being the quiet wife of the Harringtons. Lindsay sat beside me, her silence a steady anchor, her eyes asking what I'd do next. I didn't answer, but my mind was already tracing a path forward, one painted in bold, unapologetic strokes. At Lindsay's 800-square-foot apartment in the city, I poured myself water, the glass cool against my bandaged hand. The space was warm, cluttered with books, and her knitting projects a stark contrast to the Harringtons' sterile grandeur. "Abigail, are you sure about this?" Lindsay asked, her voice soft but probing. I opened my phone, pulling up a draft email I'd written months ago to Gloria McDaniel, my attorney, a woman whose sharp mind had unraveled impossible property disputes. Subject property at 118 Willow Creek, I typed. The time has come, and hit send. "I've been silent too long," I said, my voice low but firm. "Now it's their turn to listen." Lindsay nodded, her smile a quiet affirmation. The next morning, Gloria arrived, her briefcase as formidable as her gaze. In Lindsay's cramped living room, she spread out a thick folder, her fingers flipping to a notarized copy of the deed Brandon had signed. "First, we file ownership confirmation at the county office," she said, her tone all business. "Then serve the Harringtons with a 30-day eviction notice." I nodded, unblinking, the weight of the moment settling over me like a mantle. The house, that sprawling 5,000-square-foot cage, was legally mine, and I would wield it not as a trophy but as a canvas for something greater. Gloria's plan was a map, and I was ready to follow it. As Gloria left, I stood by Lindsay's window, watching the city pulse below. The cut on my palm throbbed faintly, a reminder of the night before, but it was no longer a wound. It was a mark of survival. I thought of my studio, that 200-square-foot haven behind the estate, where I'd painted through sleepless nights, dreams, dismissed by those who now faced eviction. The Harringtons thought they'd broken me, but they'd only cracked the shell. Inside, I was whole, and I would build something they could never imagine, a sanctuary for art, for truth, for me. The plan was no longer a whisper in my heart. It was a vow, and I would keep it. The bell's chime echoed through the night, a bold declaration slicing the silence of the Harrington estate. I stood at the threshold of the 3-acre property, my long coat swaying in the November chill, papers clutched in my bandaged hand. No longer the diminished wife, I was the owner, and the weight of that truth steadied my pulse. The grand doors, once a barrier to my belonging, now parted at my command. Inside, the family awaited, unaware that the ground beneath them had shifted. The amber glow of their chandeliers would soon illuminate their reckoning, and I was ready to claim what was mine. Brandon answered, his face paling as he saw me, my hair neatly tied back, my gaze unyielding. "Abigail, about yesterday," he began. But I cut him off, stepping into the 600-square-foot living room. The air held traces of wood polish and expensive perfume, a facade of control. Mildred sat on a velvet sofa, her posture rigid. Julie perched nearby, her wineglass frozen mid-sip. Cousins and aunts hovered, their whispers dying as I placed a legal notice on the glass coffee table. "You have 30 days to vacate," I said, locking eyes with Mildred. "This house has been mine since last year, per the deed." Brandon signed. Mildred's lips parted, her composure fracturing. "This is outrageous," she hissed, but her voice wavered. Julie exhaled sharply, and Brandon stood mute, his hands clenched. I let the silence stretch, savoring their disbelief. "If you thought you could erase me from my own life and keep this house, you miscalculated," I said, my words, deliberate, each one a stone sealing their fate. I turned to leave, but paused at the door. "Read the notice carefully. It's binding." The room behind me erupted in murmurs, but I stepped into the night. The crunch of gravel under my boots, a rhythm of triumph. The estate loomed dark, its windows reflecting my headlights. As I drove away, my heart a mix of victory and the ache of memories I'd soon reshape. Later, in the solitude of my 200-square-foot studio behind the house, I unrolled a sketch pad. The space smelled of linseed oil and possibility, its walls still bearing the colors Brandon once helped me choose. But those days were gone. I sketched a vision, the grand hall as a gallery, sunlight streaming through a skylight, rooms for restoration and classes, the haven. I named it a refuge for art, dismissed by those too blind to see its worth. My pencil moved with purpose, each line a promise to transform this cage into a sanctuary. The Harringtons' eviction was just the beginning. This house would become my legacy, not theirs. The studio of Professor Bennett, 50 miles outside Boston, was a sanctuary of exposed brick and slanting sunlight, the scent of turpentine mingling with hope. I spread my Haven designs across his worn table, the sketches transforming the Harrington estate into a beacon for forgotten art. Bennett, his deep voice softened by years of restoring lost masterpieces, studied the plans, his eyes sparking with approval. A bold vision, he said, removing his goggles. You're not just rebuilding a house, you're rewriting its soul. His words ignited a fire in me, and I knew this was the moment. The Haven would begin to rise from the ashes of my past. Back at the estate, the transformation began with a symphony of hammers and dust. The 12-foot-high walls shed their outdated wallpaper, revealing raw plaster ready for rebirth. Workers hauled out 300-pound armchairs Mildred had called French heritage, their absence lightening the air. I stood in the 1,000-square-foot grand hall, blueprints in hand, directing each step like a conductor. The foyer, where I'd once polished floors under Mildred's scrutiny, was stripped to its bones, its marble tiles gleaming with potential sunlight, poured through new skylights, casting patterns that danced like my dreams. Each nail driven, each wall reshaped, felt like a reclamation of my voice, long silenced by those who'd sat in these rooms. On the 10th day, I drafted a press release, my words sharp and clear. A mansion once bound by rigid tradition will become the Haven, a sanctuary for rejected art. I sent it to local papers, art blogs, and collectors, my heart pounding as I hit send. The response was swift, a tide of validation I'd never known. An independent art magazine requested an interview. A Chicago collector offered to fund an exhibit wing. Then an email from the Smithsonian Conservation Center, a place that had rejected me 3 times, proposed a collaboration on my open-access restoration model. I sat in my studio, the 200-square-foot heart of my vision, and let the weight of their recognition settle. The Harringtons had called my art a pastime. Now the world saw it as a movement. As walls rose and rooms took shape, I walked the estate's grounds. The 3-acre expanse no longer a prison, but a canvas. Lindsay joined me one morning carrying coffee, her eyes bright as she surveyed the progress. This could be a real gallery, she said, gesturing to the hall where chandeliers once hung. I nodded, picturing paintings on those walls, each one a story of resilience. Bennett's words echoed. I wasn't just rebuilding a house. The Haven was becoming a testament to what could grow from brokenness. Its foundations laid not in revenge, but in purpose. The estate, once a symbol of my erasure, now stood poised to speak my truth. The gate buzzer pierced the morning stillness, a sharp summons from the world I'd left behind. I glanced at the security monitor, my breath catching at the sight of Brandon Harrington, his overcoat rumpled, standing at the 10-foot-high entrance to my estate. The Haven's construction hummed around me, workers sanding beams in the 1,000-square-foot hall, the air thick with sawdust and promise. I'd built this sanctuary from the ruins of his family's scorn, yet here he was, a ghost of my past, demanding an audience. I spoke into the intercom, my voice calm but unyielding. Let him in, Marcus, but only to the outdoor guest area. He doesn't enter the house. The gate clicked open and I steeled myself for what was to come. On the porch, Brandon's eyes were bloodshot, his hands buried in his pockets. Thanks for seeing me, he said, his voice heavier than I remembered. You have 5 minutes, I replied, arms crossed the winter breeze tugging at my scarf. He swallowed hard. Julie's pregnant. We plan to move back here this spring. This house, it's been in our family for 4 generations. Her child should be born here to carry the tradition. I raised an eyebrow, a laugh escaping me, not cruel but devoid of warmth. You want that child to grow up where Julie mocked my first painting, in the garden where your mother made me pull weeds to prove I was a proper wife. He fell silent, his gaze dropping to the stone path. I pulled the city-stamped Haven plans from my coat. This is a community art center now funded and set to open next month. Your tradition ends here. That afternoon, as I checked the gallery's new lighting system, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. Mildred's voice cut through sharp. As ever, I'm requesting a meeting immediately. I smiled faintly. I'm under no obligation to meet you, Mrs. Harrington. Her tone shifted urgency beneath her command. You don't understand the consequences. This family has influence. You won't find peace if you dismantle our legacy. My smile hardened. I'm not dismantling tradition. I'm building a new one rooted in truth, not disdain. I hung up, but the next day she appeared at the gate, her black cashmere coat stark against the iron bars. Marcus stood firm, his voice steady. Miss Abigail doesn't take unscheduled visitors. Mildred glared into the camera, and I watched her on the monitor. The woman who once ruled this house, now halted by my key. That evening, another call came, this one trembling. Abigail, I have nowhere else to go, Julie said, her voice cracking. Brandon's cut me off, my mother's been subpoenaed, and I'm about to give birth. I have no home, no money. Memories flooded back her laughter at my art, her smugness at that dinner. Yet her plea was raw for her child. I took a breath, my hands smudged with paint from a restoration sketch. The 400-square-foot guest house behind the garden is empty. I'll reset the code. You can stay until you find another way. A sob broke through the line, and hours later, Julie arrived. Her canvas bag frayed her face, stripped of its former arrogance. Thank you, she whispered, eyes red. I led her to the guest house, its lights warm, and paused. This is for the child who didn't choose this. No one should be defined forever by their mistakes. I turned away, the weight of my choice settling like a quiet tide. When the Harringtons' lawyer emailed offering twice the estate's $2 million value, I replied with one line. I'm not interested in money. I'm interested in purpose. The Haven was my answer, its walls rising as a testament to resilience, not revenge. The Haven glowed against the winter dusk, its 2,000-square-foot gallery, a constellation of golden lights and exposed brick. I stood behind a backstage curtain, my fingers twisting a napkin, the murmur of guests, reporters, collectors, curators swelling like a tide. The opening night was here, and the mansion, once a fortress of Harrington judgment, now echoed with applause for art once cast aside. My heart pounded not from fear, but from the certainty that I had nothing left to lose. The Haven was my voice, and tonight it would sing. At 8 €. A chime signaled my speech. I stepped to the wooden podium, the spotlight warm on my face. Thank you for coming, I began, my voice steady. This place was once filled with silence and whispered scorn. Tonight it belongs to stories real, unapologetic. I signaled and staff unveiled. Reclamation, a 10-foot-wide painting of shattered glass and mirrored shards. A flipped dining table at its heart, reflecting pain, anger, and a woman standing tall, paintbrush in hand. This is dignity, I said. This is me. The room hushed, then erupted in applause, wave after wave. A Boston Review critic requested an interview. A New York collector whispered to Lindsay, "Name the price for the original." The front door opened, and Mildred entered, her back straight, with Brandon and Julie. Her pregnancy now a gentle curve. I thought this was public. Mildred said, her voice cold. "Everyone's welcome," I replied, stepping forward. Even those who called art a cheap pastime. Reporters turned cameras. "You've disgraced our legacy," she snapped. I gestured to the painting. I told the truth of what I lived. This is my voice, and it's being heard. A curator from the New England Museum of Fine Arts stepped forward. "Mrs. Harrington, we're considering this for next year's exhibit, Women and the Voice." Mildred clutched her purse, silent. Julie lowered her head. Brandon retreated. I raised my glass to Lindsay. To the words that broke me now, the foundation of something new. Monday, I was in my second-floor office when Lindsay called, her voice a whisper. Channel 9 now, the TV blared. Harrington Capital under investigation. $10 million missing Mildred. And Brandon faced suspicion for misusing client funds, including leveraging this estate. My early deed filing had saved the Haven from seizure. Gloria confirmed later. "Good thing you acted fast," she said. I exhaled watching students set up restoration classes in the 1-acre garden. Weeks later, Mildred arrived, cradling a 3-foot by 2-foot portrait of her mother, its colors faded cracks like spider webs. "I forgot it was there," she said quietly. "I wronged you, Abigail." When everything fell apart, only honesty remained. I traced a crack on the frame. "I'll restore it, but it won't be the same. Those cracks make it precious." She looked puzzled. "The past needs acknowledgement, then rebuilding with grace," I added. She paused, then said, "I'd like to work here, cleaning notes, anything to live better." I handed her a file. "Start Monday. You'll train on records, and this painting's restoration begins next week. Be involved." Gratitude flickered in her eyes, a spark where frost once lay. Julie settled into the guest house, enrolling in a 20-hour restoration course. Her son Isaac arrived one afternoon, his blue eyes gentle. Francisco and I worked on Mildred's portrait sunset, gilding the studio. "You've changed this place," he said, brushing away varnish and its people. I smiled, watching apprentices, some from top schools, others dropouts, treat each crack as a memory. "In restoration, we learn to reimagine life," I said. Francisco nodded. "What was broken becomes more beautiful." In the garden, a spring breeze carried lavender's scent. Julie pushed Isaac's stroller. Mildred jotted notes, and the boy slept dreaming of a world untouched by pain. The haven, once a crucible of pressure, was now a healing canvas, its imperfect lines honest and meaningful. I wasn't just an artist, but a keeper of memories, giving them life in the gentlest way. As I sketched for the spring exhibition, Rebuilding from Ashes, I knew the cracks in my story had built something stronger, a legacy of light woven from the shards of my past. Have you ever poured your heart into someone else's dream, only to be told you don't belong in the room where it's celebrated? I'm Camilla, 32, and I learned that lesson the hard way at my sister Kay's graduation party, a night I paid for with $850. I didn't have only to be escorted out like a stranger. That moment wasn't just a sting. It was the crack that split open years of silence, revealing a family who used my money, erased my name, and rewrote me as the outsider in their perfect story. Let me take you back to that evening in Minneapolis, where the truth started to unravel, and I began to see the cost of my loyalty. The sun was dipping low when I pulled up to the Bloomington estate, its manicured hedges and gurgling fountains screaming wealth I'd never known. Cars lined the street. My dad's crooked pickup, Kay's polished Jeep, but Grandma and Grandpa's Civic was missing a quiet absence that pricked my gut. I'd been covering Kay's rent and tuition for years, skipping dinners to send $750 monthly, $200 each semester. No complaints. I wasn't expecting a parade, just a glance, maybe a nod as I walked up in my clean white blouse and hole-free jeans, hair pulled tight. My phone glowed with a screenshot of the invite scavenged from Mom's Facebook comments. The only way I ever heard about family events. Music floated from the backyard, glasses clinked. Someone toasted, "To the future." And cheers erupted. I was almost there. At the gate, 2 security guards loomed, one lanky one built like a fridge. Private celebration. The bigger one barked. I kept my voice steady. "I'm her sister Camilla." The lanky one tapped his earpiece, muttering while I stood, arms limp, the laughter behind me, sharpening the air. Then the door swung open. Kay glided out in a glittery gold dress. $698, my money phone glued to her hand. Mom followed in her pastel cardigan, Dad unshaven, but smirking. Kay didn't hesitate. "She doesn't belong here," she said, flat as a blade. I laughed, thinking it was a jab, until Dad chuckled. "You showed up!" Mom's voice hissed, urgent. "Camilla, this is Kay's day. Don't make it something it's not." I met her eyes. "You mean like pretending I don't exist?" Dad laughed again. "Come on, you know how things are." Kay sneered. "You only helped to hold it over me. I could have listed every payment, every sacrifice, but instead I said, 'Then you're welcome.'" The gravel crunched under my flats as I walked back to my car. No tears, just a silence heavier than any fight we'd ever had. In the driver's seat, I typed one line, "Starting next month, your rent's on you. Good luck." I hit send, started the engine, and left the estate behind like a book I'd finally closed. Home felt sharper that night, the flickering streetlight on Central Avenue cutting through the dark. I dropped my keys in the bowl, kicked off my shoes, and sank onto the couch, one arm over my eyes. My phone buzzed, blocked caller. I let it ring. Twice more, same number, same silence. I didn't answer, but I didn't turn it off either. Some stubborn part of me wanting to know who couldn't let it go. The night was still the neighbor's TV, humming faintly, a car door slamming in the distance. I saw Kay's face, her gaze sliding past me like I was a delivery driver who'd wandered into her spotlight. They didn't forget me, they chose to erase me. That wasn't new. My birthday buried under a January blizzard had passed without a call, while Kay posted champagne flutes and sparkler desserts captioning, "Grateful for the ones who matter." Mom's text came the next day. "Hope, you're okay. No happy birthday, just a check-in to cover her bases." Weeks later, I noticed a tab in my bank account shared access Judith's name in bold. She'd been tracking every $5 coffee, every late Netflix charge ever since Kay asked me to send rent to Mom's account for easier tracking. I hadn't questioned it. That's what they banked on. 2 weeks before the party, Kay texted, "No greeting. Just need address." Budget, I said $200, stretching my limit. She sent a screenshot, a sleeveless gold gown, $698 plus tax. This one. You wouldn't get it, but this demands polish. I missed my bus staring at those words I still paid. Sent the money, got a thumbs up emoji. Her Instagram glowed with the dress captioned, "Deserve every bit of this moment. No mention of me." The silence wasn't forgetfulness. It was a choice, and I was starting to feel its weight. What's worse than being erased by your own family? Finding out they're laughing about it behind your back. I thought I'd seen the depth of my sister Kay's betrayal at her graduation party, the one I funded for $850 only to be turned away. But a few days later, a message from my cousin Marlene cracked that illusion wide open, showing me just how far Kay's cruelty stretched. That was the moment I stopped swallowing the silence and let the truth spill out. It was a Thursday night, the hum of my space heater, the only sound as I folded towels fresh from the dryer. My phone buzzed, startling me, Marlene's name glowing on the screen. We weren't close. She was younger, quiet at family gatherings, always smiling but saying little. Her text read, "Can I send you something privately? You need to see this." My pulse ticked up, but I typed, "Sure." 3 screenshots landed seconds later, each one a knife. A group chat K plus real ones unfolded before me. Kay's words led the charge. "Told y'all she'd show up, so desperate to be part of everything." Another, "She pays my bills and still gets treated like trash, must love it." Someone else chimed in, "Did she cry? Please tell me she cried." Kay's reply, "Didn't stay long enough. Too bad, I would have filmed it." The second screenshot burned hotter. A stranger asked, "You didn't invite her after she paid all that?" Kay answered, "Why should I? Paying doesn't mean you're family, it means you're useful." The third was a meme my face, an old Facebook photo edited with ATM, but make it sad. I sank onto the couch, the screen's glow harsh in the dark. These weren't careless words, they were sharpened to cut. Marlene texted again. "I was added to that group by accident last year. Never left, just watched. She didn't notice, I was still in it." A pause. "I'm not sending this to be mean. You deserve to know who you're defending." I didn't cry, didn't spiral. A cold clarity settled instead, like stepping into crisp air after a stifling room. "Thank you," I typed seriously. She sent a single heart. I opened the family group chat, the one filled with baby photos, bad jokes from Uncle Harold, and no messages to me since the party. The cursor blinked for a full minute. Then I typed, "Let me show you what your perfect daughter thinks of me." I attached Kay's screenshots, no explanation, just the raw truth. I hit send and watched the timestamp tick. 10 minutes passed, no replies. Then a single move, Aunt Martha left the group. No goodbye, just gone. That quiet exit told me more than any defense could. The seams of our family's facade were splitting, and I wasn't the only one who saw it. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was mine to wield. What do you do when the people who should love you most twist your pain into their inconvenience? After I exposed my sister Kay's venomous group chat in our family's digital sanctuary, I thought the silence would be my victory, but silence, I learned, can be a weapon turned back on you. In the days that followed my mother Judith's call and a tense meeting with Kay pushed me to confront the lies head-on, while an unexpected visit from Grandpa Harold lit a spark of hope in the ashes of my trust. This was the moment I stopped begging for truth and started demanding it. The family group chat stayed dead quiet after Aunt Martha's exit, a void that echoed louder than any argument I was microwaving leftover curry, when my phone lit up Judith's name, a rare sight. I let it ring, the hum of the microwave masking my hesitation. She called again, insistent, so I tapped, accept, bracing myself. Camilla. She began, her voice dripping with that rehearsed softness. I wish you hadn't posted that. You've upset your sister deeply. The words hung like damp laundry, heavy and unwanted. I let them linger before replying. You mean the sister who humiliated me after I paid for her party? Judith sighed, all exasperation. She was emotional. It was her day. I leaned against the counter, the linoleum cool under my palm. For me, it was the day I learned you'd rather erase me than face a flicker of discomfort. She deflected sharp now. We were keeping things peaceful. Why drag up every little thing? Kay's younger, figuring it out. Be the bigger person. The phrase stung, a tired script I'd heard too often. When did you last wish me a happy birthday, Mom? Silence. Her pause was louder than any apology. That's not fair, she mumbled. It's not about fairness, I said, voice steady. It's about choice. I hung up before her next excuse could land, the click of the call's end, a small rebellion. Days later, I sat across from Kay in a downtown Minneapolis cafe, its exposed brick walls a neutral stage for our standoff. She arrived late, draped in curated loungewear sunglasses perched indoors. Migraine, she quipped, smirking as I gestured to the lenses. The air between us crackled taut as a wire. I'm not here to scream, I said, folding my hands. I'm here to warn you. Twist my story again, and I won't stay quiet. Kay rolled her eyes, glancing at her phone. God, you're so dramatic. This isn't court. I leaned forward, voice low. You deleted my name from every thank you, gave Mom credit for my money. That's not forgetting. That's theft. She waved me off. Mom made sure the checks cleared, I snapped. She made sure I paid her directly. That's what she ensured. Kay raised her hands, mock surrender. If it means that much, I'll add your name somewhere. But this storm you're stirring, it's not a good look. I stood chair scraping the floor. Neither is lying. She didn't follow as I left the cafe doors chime, a final note in our fractured duet. That evening, a knock broke the stillness of my apartment. Grandpa Harold stood on my porch, a pink bakery box in hand, lemon poppy seed, muffins inside. His eyes, creased with years, held a quiet knowing. We weren't invited either, he said, settling into my worn armchair. Judith said we'd steal Kay's spotlight. My chest tightened, grief sharp behind my eyes. They said you talk too much, I whispered. He shrugged, biting into a muffin. I talk about what matters. They don't want that heard. We sat no TV, just the clink of his coffee mug. The kind of quiet that stitches wounds. You're not crazy, he said before leaving his hand on my shoulder. Don't let them make you feel it. His words lingered, a tether to something solid as I faced the battles still to come. How far would someone go to bury the truth you've just begun to unearth? After confronting my sister Kay and my mother Judith, I thought I'd drawn a line in the sand, a boundary forged in the quiet strength Grandpa Harold's words had kindled. But Kay didn't retreat. She sharpened her claws, striking not just at my heart, but at my livelihood. What came next wasn't just betrayal. It was a calculated attempt to paint me as the villain in a story I'd funded with my sacrifices. In a single email, Kay tried to rewrite my reality, but I turned to a wider stage, letting the world see the truth through a screen's unblinking eye. It was a gray Tuesday morning, the kind where Minneapolis feels like it's holding its breath. I was at my kitchen table coffee cooling when an email from Ellie, an HR acquaintance from a past contract job, blinked into my inbox. The subject line, chilling concern regarding employee behavior, sent a shiver down my spine. I opened it, and there it was, Kay's name signed at the bottom like a brand. I'm concerned about Camilla's recent behavior, she wrote. She's been emotionally erratic, posting about family online, exhibiting patterns of harassment. I fear for our safety, and this should be on record, should things escalate. Each word landed like a stone, deliberate, polished, meant to stain. This wasn't a private jab. It was a professional guillotine sent to a workplace where my reputation still lingered, where future doors might have opened. My hands trembled not with fear, but with a fury so cold it felt like clarity. Kay hadn't just mocked me, she'd tried to erase my credibility, to make me unhireable, unstable, a threat. I didn't scream, I didn't call her. Instead, I opened a folder on my laptop, one I'd started months ago when the weight of their lies first pressed too hard. Screenshots of Venmo transfers $750 monthly for rent, $200 per semester for tuition, texts from Kay emoji-laced. Thanks for the car insurance I'd covered when Judith forgot, payment confirmations emails, and a digital trail of my quiet devotion. These weren't just receipts. They were proof of a life I'd poured into her future, unacknowledged, now weaponized against me. I logged into Reddit, my throwaway account, a silent refuge, where I'd lurked through others' family dramas, finding solace in shared pain. I knew how this platform worked, how truth could ripple if you laid it bare. My fingers hovered, then typed each word, measured, unadorned. My sister tried to have me kicked out of the graduation party I paid for. Then she wrote to my job saying I was unstable. Here's what happened. I chronicled it all. No embellishment, just facts. The $850 party, the security gate, Kay's dismissal, the group, chat's cruelty, my silent sacrifices. I attached screenshots, Venmo logs, Kay's texts, and the email to HR. I ended with a line that felt like exhaling after years. Underwater. Silence protects abusers. I'm done being quiet. I hit post, closed my laptop, and waited. The response didn't creep in. It surged. Within an hour, 1,000 upvotes, comments flooding. This is emotional abuse. You're not crazy. I've been there. My family used me too. You're brave for this. By noon, it hit the subreddit's front page. Strangers' words wrapping around me like a shield I hadn't known I needed. My phone buzzed Kay's number. I let it go dark. The screen's glow fading as I stared out my window, the city's pulse steady beyond the glass. This wasn't just my story anymore. It was a beacon, and others were answering its call. The weight of that moment shifted something inside me. I wasn't just fighting for myself now. I was fighting for every invisible scar carried by those who read my words. Kay's email had aimed to silence me, but it misfired, pushing me to a platform where my voice couldn't be deleted. The Reddit thread grew, each comment a crack in the facade my family had polished for years. I didn't know what Kay would do next, but I knew I'd meet it head-on, armed with a truth that was no longer mine alone to carry. What happens when the truth you've set free starts dismantling the lies others have built around you? After my Reddit post exposing Kay's betrayal went viral, I felt the world shift, strangers' voices amplifying my own. But my family didn't retreat quietly. They doubled down, rewriting me out of their legacy with a cruelty that cut deeper than any gatekeeper's dismissal. In the days that followed, a hidden document and a showdown stripped away, the last illusions leaving me to wield the truth, not just for myself, but for anyone who'd ever been erased. The Reddit thread burned bright, thousands of upvotes and comments piling up like kindling. This family is a masterclass in manipulation, one wrote. I hope she never gives them another second of peace, said another. My phone buzzed with Kay's call, but I let it fade, the silence. My first victory. Her Instagram went private. Stories vanished. Judith's Facebook locked tight. A digital retreat that spoke of panic. Then a voice memo from Jamie, a high school classmate tied to Kay's circle, landed in my inbox. 5 minutes of chaos, laughter, gum chewing. Then Kay's voice sharp. She's my ATM. She'll cave, always does. A quieter voice murmured, That's cold, Kay snapped back. Guilt is cheaper than gratitude. My stomach didn't twist. It settled, the truth, no longer a shock but a confirmation. I posted the memo to Reddit titled, Turns Out. I wasn't crazy, just surrounded by people who profited from the lie. The response exploded, comments quoting Kay's words like evidence in a trial. Aunt Martha left the family group chat again, her silence a quiet rebellion. Then one early morning the mail slot rattled. A brown envelope lay on my floor. No return address, my name scrawled in unfamiliar ink. Inside a scanned will, my parents highlighted, annotated, and brutal. Every asset, every heirloom, every dollar went to Kay. My name wasn't mentioned, not even as a footnote. The air left my lungs not from surprise, but from the starkness of their choice. I forwarded it to Grandpa Harold, who called within minutes. "That's new," he said, voice low. "2 years ago, you were in it." Another call followed. Eleanor, a distant relative, whispering, "Judith didn't tell anyone. Said you were too dramatic for anything real." I laughed, bitter, the sound echoing in my empty kitchen. 2 days later, I walked into Judith's house unannounced, the envelope in hand. Kay lounged on the couch, loungewear pristine, scrolling her phone. Walter sat at the dining table, newspaper open like a shield. Judith stood on the stairs, arms crossed, ready to lecture. I dropped the will between them. No theatrics. One honest conversation, I said, "That's all I want." Judith opened her mouth, but I cut through. "If your love was conditional, say it. If family means silence and service, admit it. Stop dressing it as care." Walter glanced up, eyes narrow. "That's not fair." I held his gaze. "What's not fair is rewriting history and calling it healing." Kay reached for her phone, but I warned, "Don't. If you're recording to make me look unhinged, wait till I'm gone." Her hand froze. Judith tried again. "You don't understand." I shook my head. "I understand more than you ever gave me credit for." I stepped back, the house's curated warmth, same photos, same furniture, feeling like a museum of lies. "This place isn't mine," I said. "I just funded the illusion." I left the doors click final. By evening, I'd uploaded the will to Reddit, captioned, "Let's stop pretending this was ever about family." The thread ignited. "This is next-level manipulation. She gave everything and got erased. Where do I send her flowers?" Kay deleted her Instagram. Judith's Facebook vanished entirely. Eleanor texted, "I didn't know I didn't." I half believed her, but belief wasn't my currency anymore. Harold called, voice steady. "Proud of you." I stood at my window, the city's lights blinking out one by one, and felt the weight lift, not gone, but shared, carried by a chorus of voices who saw me when my family wouldn't. When you've torn down the walls others built to cage you, what do you create in their place? After exposing my family's lies, Kay's venom, Judith's erasure, the will that wrote me out, I found not emptiness, but space. Space to rebuild, to choose myself, to speak for others, still silenced. In the weeks that followed, unexpected allies and a new purpose anchored me, and I learned that truth doesn't just break chains. It builds bridges to those who've walked the same shadowed paths. This is how I found my voice, and why I'm asking you to find yours. 3 weeks after the Reddit firestorm, I parked outside a nonprofit office in Minneapolis, its creaky floors and peeling paint, a far cry from the Bloomington Estates Polish. My desk was bare. No photos, no clutter, just a clean slate. As director of outreach, I chased grants, emailed shelters, and planned Zoom calls with purpose, not dread. The salary was modest, the hours flexible, the mission mine. Marlene and Adrian visited one rainy morning with damp curls and hesitant smiles. Adrian handed me an envelope, $60 cash, a note in his neat script. "One lunch for each month. I acted like you didn't matter. I failed you," he said. Voice cracking. Marlene shrugged. "I thought you were intense. Now I know you were just outnumbered." We sat in my front room, no forced apologies, just a quiet that felt like mending. Later. Harold dropped by a diner, its burnt coffee scent clinging to cracked red booths. "I heard Judith and Walter last week," he said, mug steady in his hands. "They laughed like spinning you out was a game." His eyes held mine. "They think people forget. They're wrong." My phone buzzed at lunch, Harold like clockwork. "You eat yet?" I smiled, about to. "Working too hard, no harder than I want." His laugh warmed the line. "Eleanor stopped by with muffins, no grand gestures, just thought you might be too busy." Her eyes, softer, now saw me in a way they hadn't before. No one said, "Sorry, not Judith, not Walter, not Kay." and I didn't need them to. Their absence was clarity enough. Then an email from a downtown college invited me to speak on a resilience panel. "We've followed your posts," they wrote. "Your story could reach students who feel invisible." I stared at the screen, then typed, "I'd be honored." It wasn't about reliving pain. It was about giving voice to those still searching for words. One Friday, I claimed my usual cafe table by the window, a muffin, and a second coffee for no one in particular. I scrolled past Kay's locked profile. Comments faded her silence. A ghost I no longer chased. I journaled instead ideas for the panel names of women to invite, a quote I'd carried. "You do not have to set yourself on fire to keep others warm." I underlined it, the pen's scratch. A quiet vow that evening, passing a glass storefront, my reflection caught me, not weary, not bitter, just whole. Harold called, prattling about his garden, a neighbor's dog digging holes. I laughed, the sound lighter than I'd thought possible. Before bed, I turned off the light, left the window open, and slept. Without fear of the morning, I used to think peace meant swallowing pain, that loyalty was measured by how much you could endure. But silence doesn't make you noble. It makes you invisible. Speaking up isn't revenge. It's reclaiming your place, saying, "I was here. I mattered," to anyone watching who's felt dismissed, diminished, erased in their own story. You're not alone. You don't need permission to exist. The quietest choices, walking away, standing firm, echo loudest. So tell me, have you ever chosen yourself over silence? Watched someone else be erased and stayed quiet? Would you choose differently now? Drop a comment, share where you're from, or just a one if this resonates. If this story stirred something in you, reminded you that your truth matters, hit subscribe. We don't just tell stories here, we tell truths, and yours is waiting to be heard.